August 17, 1983. Fort Benning, Georgia, 2:47 a.m. Darkness shrouded Fort Benning. The steady drumbeat of rain masked the approaching footsteps of men who moved like shadows between buildings. The air hung heavy with moisture, visibility reduced to mere yards as storm clouds obliterated the moon. Lightning flashed in the distance, momentarily illuminating the silhouettes of armed figures converging on the command complex. Then came the first crack of gunfire, a distinctive sound that veterans recognized immediately, the controlled three-round burst of an M16 on full auto. Not random fire, but the disciplined shooting of trained operators. More shots followed, methodical and precise. Radio channels erupted with frantic calls. Base command, this is checkpoint, Charlie. We're taking fire from multiple directions. Medical needs backup at the barracks. We have men down. This is NATO security detail. We're pinned down in Sector 4. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morgan lay prone on the observation tower, cold sweat trickling down her spine, despite the rain soaking through her uniform. The Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle felt like an extension of her body, its weight comforting rather than burdensome. Through her night vision scope, she tracked the final terrorist moving through the downpour, 356 meters away, nearly the maximum effective range of even this extraordinary weapon. The SEAL team was trapped in the command building directly behind the terrorist who clutched a remote detonator. If he triggered it, the explosives planted throughout the structure would kill not only the American special operators, but also 12 NATO officials representing the alliance's counterterrorism command. Wind howled at 17 miles per hour, gusting to 22, enough to push a .50 caliber round off course by several feet at this distance. Humidity at 82%. Barometric pressure falling. Every environmental factor conspired to make this shot nearly impossible. Rebecca adjusted her scope, calculating complex ballistic coefficients in her head. The bullet would drop approximately 29 feet over the course of its flight. Windage adjustment required compensation for not just speed, but the shifting direction as the round passed between buildings. The rain would create additional drag. She factored in the Coriolis effect. The Earth's rotation would actually influence the bullet's path at this extreme distance. Through her earpiece, she could hear the desperate transmissions from inside the command building. We can't hold them much longer. East wall is compromised. Hostiles have breaches on two sides. Where's our damn backup? We've got wounded in here. The NATO delegation is trapped. Rebecca controlled her breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale halfway hold. Her heartbeat slowed to a measured 62 beats per minute. Her finger caressed the trigger of the Barrett, taking up the first pressure point. Now or never, she whispered and squeezed. The .50 caliber round exploded from the barrel at 800 feet per second, the massive recoil absorbed by her perfectly positioned body. For 1.44 seconds, the bullet cut through rain and wind, following its calculated trajectory through the night. Then the terrorist dropped the detonator, falling harmlessly from his lifeless hand. The radio crackled with Colonel Miller's voice. Dear God, you just saved all our lives. Rebecca's response was calm, professional. Target 15 eliminated. Threat neutralized. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the observation tower, where she lay, revealing not the battle-hardened veteran one might expect, but a 26-year-old woman who had just accomplished what many considered impossible: 15 consecutive shots at extreme distances under combat conditions, each finding its mark with surgical precision. But in that moment, with rain washing over her face and the acrid smell of gunpowder in her nostrils, Rebecca Morgan didn't know she had just fired 15 shots that would echo through military history for decades to come. The first time Rebecca held a rifle, she was 7 years old. Standing on the rocky hillside behind her family's Blue Ridge mountain home, her grandfather placed his weathered Winchester Model 70 in her small hands. Too heavy, Samuel Morgan asked, his voice as rough as the Georgia mountains surrounding them. Rebecca shook her head, her eyes fixed on the makeshift target 100 yards downhill. The weight felt right, as if the rifle had been waiting for her. She instinctively nestled the stock against her shoulder, her cheek finding the natural weld position without instruction. Remember what I taught you, her grandfather said. Breathe easy, see your target, become the bullet. She fired. The can flew off the fence post. Samuel Morgan, legendary sniper of the 3rd Infantry Division in World War II, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross for holding off a German battalion at Anzio with nothing but his rifle and determination, Nodded once. That single nod contained more approval than most people receive from him in a lifetime. The Morgan Eye, he said simply. You've got it. The Morgan Eye was family legend, a preternatural ability to judge distance, account for environmental factors, and connect with targets at ranges that seemed impossible to others. Samuel Morgan had used it to become one of the deadliest snipers in the European theater. Rebecca's father had inherited it using the gift during his service in Korea. By 12, Rebecca had won the Georgia Junior Marksmanship Championship, outperforming competitors twice her age. At 14, she could hit moving targets at 600 yards with iron sights, no scope required. By 16, she could hit targets at distances that made experienced hunters shake their heads in disbelief. Her father, Major Thomas Morgan, had followed the family tradition, serving as a Special Forces operative during the Korean War. When he returned home, he rarely spoke of his experiences, but carried them in the lines etched across his face and the nightmares that sometimes woke the household. Shooting is the easy part, he once told Rebecca, while cleaning his service pistol, his hands moving with mechanical precision through a ritual performed thousands of times. It's knowing when to shoot that matters. The Morgan family home stood as a testament to 3 generations of military service medals framed on walls, photographs of men in uniform shelves lined with books on tactics and military history. A display case held her grandfather's Winchester, her father's M1 Garand, and antique firearms dating back to the Civil War. For Rebecca, the path seemed predestined. The only question was which branch would best utilize her extraordinary talents. In 1975, at 18, Rebecca enlisted in the U.S. Army, a decision that surprised no one who knew the Morgan legacy. What did raise eyebrows was her announcement that she ultimately aimed to join the Navy SEALs, an elite unit that had never admitted a woman. Impossible, her father had said, not unkindly, but with the certainty of a man who knew the military's unwritten rules. Some doors stay closed no matter how good you are. Rebecca had merely nodded the same single nod her grandfather had given her on that hillside years ago. We'll see. Lebanon, 1982. Rebecca crouched in the shattered remains of a Beirut apartment building, dust filtering through shafts of sunlight. 6 floors below, a Mercedes sedan idled at a checkpoint, its driver arguing with the Lebanese militia members. Inside that vehicle, intelligence confirmed, was Mahmoud al-Naziri, the mastermind behind 3 embassy bombings that had killed 27 Americans. This was Rebecca's second combat deployment, her first as a designated marksman. The mission: eliminate al-Naziri if positive identification could be made. The complication: extreme range civilian proximity and deteriorating political conditions that demanded absolute certainty and perfect execution. You sure you're up for this, Morgan? Captain Reynolds had asked during the mission briefing, skepticism evident in his voice. This isn't the firing range at Fort Bragg. I'm sure, sir, she had replied, not bothering to correct him, that her scores at Bragg had broken records previously held by men with twice her experience. Now, as she calculated the shot parameters, those doubts seemed distant. The range 738 meters, visibility clear, wind 8 mph from the southeast. The technical aspects were challenging, but manageable. The psychological pressure was the real test, knowing that her target was surrounded by civilians, that one misjudgment could derail the mission and potentially spark an international incident. Through her scope, Rebecca observed al-Naziri's distinctive profile as he leaned forward in the passenger seat. Positive identification confirmed. She keyed her radio once the signal that she had the shot. Execute, came the simple command from her team leader. Rebecca's bullet struck al-Naziri precisely where intended, a clean shot that eliminated the target without harming the driver or nearby civilians. The operation was textbook perfect, executed with a precision that even the most experienced operators had to admire. Later at the extraction point, Captain Reynolds approached her, his earlier skepticism replaced with something resembling respect. That was some shot, Morgan, he acknowledged. Don't think I've seen better. Thank you, sir. Still, he added, unable to completely abandon his preconceptions. This was an isolated situation. Special operations work requires more than just shooting skills. Rebecca met his gaze directly. Yes, sir. It requires judgment, adaptability, and the ability to perform under extreme pressure. I'm ready to demonstrate all of those whenever required. Reynolds had no response to that, but his report noted, Sergeant Morgan's performance was exemplary, demonstrating capabilities that would be valuable in special operations contexts. It was one of many mission evaluations that praised her skills while carefully avoiding any suggestion that she might be qualified for the elite units that remain closed to women. The pattern would repeat throughout her early career exceptional performance, followed by qualified commendations that never quite translated into the opportunities she sought. After Lebanon came Grenada in October 1983, where Rebecca served as part of a specialized sniper unit supporting the main invasion force. During a particularly chaotic engagement, she provided overwatch for a pinned-down Ranger unit, eliminating 5 hostiles who were preparing to ambush the American forces. "Whoever that sniper is, I owe them a case of beer," the Ranger captain said afterward, unaware that him was actually a woman who couldn't legally serve in his unit, despite having just saved it. These experiences hardened Rebecca's resolve. Each mission demonstrated that capability, not gender-determined effectiveness in combat situations. Yet the institutional barriers remained firmly in place, preserved by tradition and protected by those who believe that some military roles should remain exclusively male domains. The winter of 1979 brought Rebecca to an old family cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Her grandfather had passed away 3 months earlier, and she had taken a rare week of leave to help her father sort through his belongings. The cabin built by her great-grandfather after the Civil War stood as a monument to an earlier America hand-hewn logs, a stone fireplace, and floors worn smooth by generations of Morgan boots. Rebecca had spent summers here as a child listening to her grandfather's war stories while thunderstorms rolled across the mountains. "This place hasn't changed in 100 years, her father observed as they carried boxes of her grandfather's possessions from the dusty attic. Samuel never saw much reason for modernizing. He valued permanence," Rebecca replied, running her hand along a wooden beam blackened by decades of hearth smoke. "Things that last." On the third day, while removing rotted floorboards in what had been her grandfather's bedroom, Rebecca noticed something unusual, a section of floor that didn't match the rest. The boards were newer, the nails less rusted than those surrounding them. "Dad," she called out, "take a look at this." Thomas Morgan examined the section, frowning slightly. "I never knew about this. Samuel always was good at keeping secrets." Together they pried up the boards, revealing a metal lockbox, its surface covered in dust, but otherwise untouched by time. The box was military grade, similar to those used for storing classified documents. "Should we open it?" Rebecca asked. Her father considered for a moment, then nodded. "Samuel's gone. Whatever secrets he kept, they're family history now." Inside lay a collection of leather-bound journals, yellowed photographs in manila folders stamped classified in Operation Artemis. A smaller envelope contained a single key with no identifying marks. Rebecca sat cross-legged on the floor, turning pages by the light of an old kerosene lamp. Her grandfather's precise handwriting filled the journals, not his World War II experience, which she had heard throughout her childhood, but something entirely different. April 14, 1962. First selection completed. 12 women chosen, all exceptional marksmen. Training begins at Dugway next month. Pentagon remains skeptical, but the Bay of Pigs fiasco has created openings for unconventional approaches. June 30th, 1962. Artemis team performing beyond expectations. Johnson hit targets at 1 to 100 yards consistently today. Fisher demonstrated extraordinary abilities under stress simulation. Traditional metrics for physical capability clearly inadequate for predicting operational effectiveness. October 8, 1963. First deployment. A-team successfully eliminated target in Havana. CIA officially denies knowledge of operation. The women performed flawlessly, better than any male team could have in this context. Infiltration was seamless, precisely because no one suspects female operatives in these roles. Photographs showed women in nondescript military attire handling sniper rifles with obvious expertise. One image showed her grandfather standing beside a stern-faced woman holding what appeared to be a record target sheet. The woman's expression conveyed intense focus and determination, rather than the traditional military stoicism. The classified folders contained mission reports, training protocols, and personnel files. Operation Artemis, a top-secret Cold War program training female snipers for covert operations behind enemy lines, specifically in situations where male operatives would stand out or be unable to access certain environments. "Dad, did you know about this?" Rebecca asked, showing him the documents. Thomas Morgan shook his head, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else, perhaps pride. Samuel never mentioned it, not once. Rebecca's hands trembled as she read the final entry dated May 22nd, 1973. Program terminated today. All records ordered destroyed. 26 successful operations across 11 years, and now they'll be erased from history. The women deserve better. America's enemies fear our missiles and our men, but some of our greatest victories came from shadows, where no one thought to look at the hands of women who served their country without recognition or glory. Perhaps someday the world will be ready to acknowledge their contributions. Until then, I will preserve this record against orders. Truth matters even when hidden. The final pages contained a list of names the women of Artemis, along with their remarkable achievements. Katherine Johnson, 18, confirmed eliminations, including a Soviet arms dealer in Budapest. Elizabeth Fisher pioneered night infiltration techniques still used by special forces. Margaret Chen developed innovative approaches to urban sniper operations that reduced civilian casualties by 64%. Beneath these records lay a folded map with markings indicating a location less than 20 miles from the cabin, an abandoned mine shaft converted to a secure storage facility. The key, Rebecca realized. It must be for whatever is stored there. Her father studied the map, recognition dawning. I know this place. Samuel used to disappear there sometimes, claimed he was checking old mining equipment. I never questioned it. The next day, they located the mine entrance, concealed behind decades of natural growth. The key opened a rusted metal door that led to a small chamber carved from the living rock. Inside, preserved in military storage containers, they found additional evidence of Project Artemis training, films, equipment, modifications designed for female operators, and most significantly, after-action reports documenting missions that officially never happened. Rebecca sat motionless as the implications sank in. This wasn't just family history. This was American military history that had been deliberately buried. Women had served as elite operatives, as precision shooters decades before the military would officially acknowledge such possibilities. They erased them, she said quietly. These women did everything their male counterparts did, often better, and they were simply erased. Her father nodded, his weathered face solemn. The military preserves certain traditions at all costs. Samuel understood that, but he also believed in recognizing excellence wherever it appeared. This was the first twist of fate that would shape Rebecca Morgan's destiny, the discovery of Project Artemis, the secret female sniper unit erased from Cold War history. It transformed her personal ambition into something larger, a mission not just to advance her own career, but to reclaim a hidden legacy of female excellence in military service. By 1982, Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morgan had built an impeccable military record. Expert marksman ratings on every weapon system in the Army arsenal, perfect physical fitness scores, exemplary performance in 3 combat deployments, 2 classified operations in the Middle East, and an extraction mission in Grenada that had saved a diplomatic team. Her personnel file read like fiction, commendations from generals' mission success rates that defied statistical probability, and shooting scores that had initially been questioned as recording errors until she repeated them under direct observation. Colonel James Miller, a 68-year-old former SEAL who had transitioned to Army Special Operations Command, had become her mentor and advocate. Miller had served with Rebecca's grandfather in the Korean War and recognized in her the same extraordinary talents. In 40 years of military service, Miller told her during a range evaluation, "I've never seen anyone shoot like you. Not anyone." He watched as Rebecca demonstrated a technique she had developed for engaging multiple targets at extreme distances, a method that involved maintaining awareness of shifting wind conditions while transitioning between firing positions. She placed 15 rounds into 5 targets ranging from 400 to 800 meters each shot, finding its mark with unwavering precision. The Barrett M82A1 is reaching prominence in sniper units, Miller commented as they examined her targets afterward. "Have you trained with it?" "Twice," Rebecca replied. "Interesting weapon. Heavy, but the ballistics are exceptional." Miller nodded. "It's changing the game. Effective range beyond 1,500 meters in the right hands." "Your hands," he added significantly. It was Miller who first suggested she apply to SEAL training, despite knowing the obstacles she would face. The world is changing, he'd said, his weathered face thoughtful. The military changes slower than most, but it does change. Sometimes it needs a push. During a joint exercise in Panama, Rebecca met Major Richard Henderson, a veteran operator who had served alongside her grandfather in Korea. Sam Morgan, Henderson had said, his eyes distant with memory. Best damn shot I ever saw. Until now. He nodded toward the target where Rebecca had just placed 5 consecutive rounds through the same hole at 800 meters. The exercise involved a simulated hostage situation, multiple targets interspersed with non-combatants in a mock village. Rebecca had been assigned as one of 4 snipers providing overwatch. When the operation began, she eliminated 3 hostiles within 6 seconds, including one who appeared unexpectedly from a hidden position that threatened the extraction team. How did you acquire that third target so quickly? Henderson asked afterward. He was obscured from your assigned position. I calculated probable hiding locations before we began, Rebecca explained. I had pre-ranged 5 potential emergence points that weren't covered by other snipers. Henderson raised an eyebrow. That's uncommonly thorough. Thoroughness keeps people alive, sir. Henderson pulled her aside after the exercise. You're wasted in conventional units. Have you considered the teams? I've considered it, Rebecca replied carefully. But as I understand it, women aren't eligible for SEAL training. Henderson's expression hardened. Policies are written by people who sit behind desks. The battlefield doesn't care about gender. It only respects skill, courage, and the will to complete the mission. He paused. Submit your application. I know people at Naval Special Warfare Command. Make them say no to your face. 3 times between 1982 and 1983, Rebecca Morgan submitted applications to the Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training Program. 3 times she received identical form letters. Candidate does not meet the physical requirements for SEAL operations. The letters came despite fitness scores that exceeded the SEAL qualification standards, despite marksmanship abilities that surpassed many active-duty SEAL snipers, despite combat experience that demonstrated her effectiveness under the most demanding conditions. After the 3rd rejection, she requested a face-to-face interview with the selection board. To her surprise, the request was granted. Commander Elizabeth Hawkins, the highest-ranking woman at Naval Special Warfare Command, conducted the interview. Her office walls displayed photographs from a career spanning 3 decades, one of the first women to graduate from the Naval Academy among the pioneering female officers in the modern Navy. Your qualifications are impressive, Staff Sergeant Morgan, Hawkins said, reviewing Rebecca's file. Your shooting scores alone would place you in the top percentile of current SEAL operators. Rebecca remained silent, waiting for the inevitable but. However, Hawkins continued, this isn't about your skills. It's about physical capabilities that, frankly, most women don't possess. The SEAL training program has specific standards that are based on the physical demands of real-world operations. I've met or exceeded every physical standard in the qualification documents, Rebecca replied evenly. On paper, yes. Hawkins picked up a separate folder. But our analysis suggests these results may not translate to operational environments. Upper body strength, load-bearing capacity over extended periods, swimming endurance with equipment, these remain areas of concern. Rebecca leaned forward. With respect, Commander, those concerns are based on assumptions rather than my demonstrated performance. I've carried combat loads through mountain terrain in Afghanistan. I've operated continuously for 72 hours with minimal support during the Grenada extraction. Hawkins sighed. Look, Morgan, I understand your frustration. I've fought my own battles for equality in the Navy. But we're not being discriminatory here. We're being realistic about human biology. The average woman simply doesn't have the upper body strength, endurance, or physical resilience required for the kinds of operations SEALs undertake. I'm not average, Rebecca said. No. Hawkins agreed, you're not, but policy isn't made for exceptions. As Rebecca stood to leave, Hawkins added, for what it's worth, I think you're fighting the right fight. Just know that institutions change slowly, and the SEALs will be among the last to open their doors. The rejection stung not because Rebecca questioned her own abilities, but because she understood that institutional barriers were preventing her from serving at the highest levels of military capability. She had spent her entire career proving that competence transcended gender, only to encounter a wall that seemed impenetrable regardless of her qualifications. Following her final SEAL application rejection, Rebecca was assigned to Fort Benning as a marksmanship instructor for Army Rangers. The position recognized her exceptional shooting skills while keeping her firmly outside the special operations community she sought to join. 3 weeks after arriving at Fort Benning, Rebecca stopped at an abandoned gas station on a back road near the base. The 1930s-era filling station had been closed for decades, its pumps rusted monuments to the Great Depression. She had noticed the building during her morning runs and was drawn to its desolate dignity. The weather-beaten structure stood at a crossroads, paint peeling from clapboards that had witnessed nearly 50 years of American history. Rebecca studied the faded Texaco star on the crumbling facade, imagining the stories this place could tell of travelers during the Dust Bowl, of soldiers heading to World War II, of families on post-war road trips across an America transforming itself. As she examined the architectural details, a black SUV with government plates pulled into the gravel lot. Rebecca instinctively stepped into the shadows of the old building, her military instincts activating at the unusual sight. This location was miles from the main roads, an unlikely destination for official vehicles. Two men in civilian clothes exited the vehicle and entered the station through a side door Rebecca hadn't noticed. Their movements were precise, economical military training, evident in every step. Both wore the conservative dark suits and regulation haircuts typical of senior officers in civilian attire. Curiosity overrode caution. Rebecca moved silently to a broken window, positioning herself to listen without being seen. Years of tactical training had taught her how to remain undetected while gathering intelligence. Phase 1 of Guardian is complete, said a voice with the unmistakable authority of a senior officer. The integration study has been successfully compromised. The data now shows failure rates for female candidates at 94%, statistically insurmountable. The senators were pleased with the results, asked a second voice. Extremely. The committee will use these findings to block any legislation promoting gender integration in combat units for at least 5 years. We've effectively delayed the issue until most of us are comfortably retired. In Naval Special Warfare Command, asked the second voice, fully committed to maintaining traditional standards. We've placed key personnel on the training cadre who understand the importance of preserving the integrity of special operations. No woman will ever wear the trident regardless of individual capabilities. The British and Canadians are moving ahead with integration in their special forces. Their mistake. We've made our position clear to our NATO counterparts. American units will not participate in joint operations with mixed-gender special operations teams. They'll fall in line eventually. In the Morgan situation, Rebecca froze at the mention of her name. Being monitored, her shooting skills make her visible, potentially problematic. But she's been contained at Benning. The rejection from SEAL training should discourage further attempts. And if it doesn't, a chilling pause. Then more permanent solutions may be necessary. The society is committed to preserving military tradition at any cost. We've sacrificed too much to allow social experiments to degrade operational effectiveness. The old man's journals. No sign of them yet. We're still searching Morgan's family properties. Samuel was clever. If he preserved records of Artemis, he hid them well. The men's conversation shifted to operational details, names, dates, locations that meant nothing to Rebecca, but the implications were clear. This was no random meeting. This was a coordinated effort, Operation Guardian, specifically designed to prevent gender integration in elite military units. As the men returned to their vehicle, Rebecca remained motionless in the shadows. The casual discussion of permanent solutions echoed in her mind, a veiled threat she couldn't ignore. And the reference to her grandfather's journals confirmed her suspicions. Project Artemis was known to this society, and they were actively working to ensure its history remained buried. This was the second twist of fate, the discovery of a clandestine organization working actively to maintain gender barriers in the military regardless of individual merit or capability. The revelation transformed Rebecca's personal ambition into something larger, a struggle against a system that prioritized tradition over talent and effectiveness. July 1983 found Rebecca refining her skills on Fort Benning's most isolated shooting range. While her official duties involved training rangers in basic marksmanship, her personal regimen was far more demanding. She had constructed a series of challenging scenarios, moving targets at extreme distances, precision, shooting in adverse weather conditions, rapid engagement of multiple threats. Each drill pushed the boundaries of what most military experts considered possible. For this session, she focused on environmental compensation, the ability to calculate and adjust for wind humidity and atmospheric pressure in real time. Rebecca had developed a systematic approach that combined mathematical precision with intuitive understanding of how bullets behaved in flight. 22 minutes per hour crosswind humidity at 76% pressure falling, she murmured, making mental calculations as she observed the distant flags and vegetation movement. Her target, a 12-inch steel plate at 200 meters a shot that would challenge even the most experienced military snipers. She fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. Even through the spotting scope, the grouping was invisible. 3 rounds had struck within a half-inch of each other, dead center on the target. "Impressive," came a voice behind her. Rebecca turned to find Colonel Miller observing from the firing line. She hadn't heard him approach, a testament to his own operational background. "Just practice, sir," she replied, securing her rifle. "That's not practice," Miller said, examining the target through his own scope. "That's pushing the boundaries of what's possible with current technology." Colonel Miller observed these solo sessions occasionally, his weathered face revealing nothing, as Rebecca consistently achieved results that defied conventional wisdom about the limits of precision shooting. "You're not just training anymore," he noted as they cleaned their weapons. "You're preparing." Rebecca nodded. "Something's coming. I can feel it." Miller studied her for a moment. "The men you overheard at that gas station, they call themselves the Society." "Yes, they mentioned preserving military tradition at any cost." Miller's expression darkened. "There are rumors in certain circles about a group called the Society for Military Tradition. High-ranking officers, retired generals, even some politicians, united by the belief that military effectiveness is tied to traditional gender roles. Most dismiss it as Pentagon folklore." "It's real," Rebecca said, "and they know who I am." "Which makes you a potential target." Miller removed a folded paper from his pocket. "I've been making inquiries about your SEAL applications. The rejections didn't come from the standard selection board. They were flagged by someone at a higher level, someone with enough authority to override normal protocols." Rebecca absorbed this information, pieces falling into place. "They're systematically blocking qualified women regardless of capabilities." "It appears so." Miller hesitated. "Rebecca, you need to be careful. These people operate in shadows, but they have real influence." "What should I do?" "Give up, accept that certain doors will remain closed because of politics rather than performance." "No," Miller said firmly. "You prepare. You continue to develop skills no one can deny. And when the moment comes, because it will come, you will be ready to demonstrate that capability is what matters, not gender." He handed her a ballistic chart for the Barrett M82A1 50 caliber sniper rifle. "Familiarize yourself with these. The Barrett is changing long-range engagement doctrine. Effective range beyond 1,500 meters with sub-MOA accuracy in the right hands." Rebecca studied the data with intense interest. "The 50 BMG round creates unique challenges. Atmospheric drag coefficients differ substantially from standard sniper calibers." "Exactly. Most shooters struggle with the transition. I suspect you won't." Miller paused. "Master this weapon system, Rebecca. It may prove significant." What neither of them knew was how soon that moment would arrive, or how dramatically it would unfold. In early August 1983, Fort Benning began preparations for a classified NATO counterterrorism summit. Special operations units from the United States, Britain, Germany, France, and Canada would gather to develop joint response protocols for emerging terrorist threats. The base transformed from a training facility to a high-security zone as elite operators and senior military officials arrived. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Delta Force, British SAS, German KSK, the world's premier special operations forces concentrated in one location. Rebecca was assigned to conduct specialized marksmanship training for a mixed group of American and Allied operators. The irony wasn't lost on her, teaching advanced shooting techniques to men from units she wasn't permitted to join, despite outperforming many of them on the range. Her first session with the NATO operators revealed the diversity of approaches to special operations across the alliance. The British and Canadian forces included female personnel in support roles, while German units maintained strict gender separation. The French approach was more pragmatic, skill-determined assignment, though few women had qualified for their most elite units. During one training session, a British SAS captain observed Rebecca demonstrate a technique for engaging multiple targets at varying distances. "Bloody impressive," he remarked afterward. "You'd be an asset to any special operations unit. Why aren't you serving with your special forces?" Before Rebecca could respond, an American officer interjected, "Different standards, different traditions. The U.S. maintains gender separation in certain combat roles." The British officer frowned. "Seems a waste of talent. We've had women in our special reconnaissance units for years, not many, mind you, but the exceptional ones prove invaluable, especially in operations where male operators would stand out." Such as Rebecca asked, seizing the opportunity to gather information on real-world applications, urban surveillance in conservative regions, intelligence gathering in environments where women are less scrutinized, precision shooting in contexts where the shooter's gender is irrelevant to the outcome. The British officer shrugged. "Capability should determine assignment, not chromosomes." The American officer's expression hardened. "We have our reasons." That evening, Rebecca received a summons to Colonel Miller's office. She found him reviewing security protocols for the upcoming NATO summit, his desk covered with maps and contingency plans. "Something doesn't feel right," Miller said without preamble. "Security arrangements have been changed 3 times in the past week. The command structure is fragmented. Communication protocols keep shifting." "Normal pre-summit adjustments," Rebecca suggested. Miller shook his head. "No, someone's deliberately creating confusion, creating gaps." He spread a map of Fort Benning across his desk. "The summit will be held here in the secure conference facility. All key NATO officials and special operations commanders will be present. If someone wanted to strike a devastating blow against Western counterterrorism capabilities, this would be the perfect opportunity." "You think there's a threat?" Rebecca asked. "I think we need to be prepared for one." Miller circled several locations on the map. "These are sniper positions I want monitored during the summit. I'm putting you in charge of a security team covering the eastern approach." Rebecca studied the map. "These aren't standard security positions. They're offset from the main perimeter." "Exactly. If there is a threat, it may come from an unexpected direction." Miller's eyes met hers. "I'm trusting your instincts and your abilities. If something happens, you may be our last line of defense." As Rebecca left Miller's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that events were accelerating towards some unseen collision point. The discovery of Project Artemis, the overheard conversation about Operation Guardian, and now these unusual security concerns separate threads weaving together into a pattern she couldn't yet discern. What she didn't know was that in less than 72 hours, she would find herself at the center of a crisis that would test the limits of her extraordinary abilities and potentially change the course of military history. August 17, 1983 began like any other day at Fort Benning. Rebecca rose before dawn, completed her physical training routine, and reported to the range where she was scheduled to conduct a specialized shooting clinic for a mixed unit of Rangers and visiting NATO special operators. The morning session focused on precision shooting under adverse conditions, variable winds, limited visibility, moving targets. As always, Rebecca demonstrated each technique before instructing others, consistently achieving results that left even experienced operators shaking their heads in admiration. "That's not normal," muttered a German KSK operator after watching Rebecca place 5 consecutive rounds into a target silhouette at 900 meters during a rain squall. A Navy SEAL chief nodded in agreement. "I've seen maybe 2 shooters at that level in 20 years with the teams." Rebecca ignored the comments, focusing instead on helping the operators improve their own skills. This wasn't about showcasing her abilities. It was about enhancing the effectiveness of those who would deploy into harm's way. At 1400 hours, she dismissed the class and headed to Colonel Miller's office for a final security briefing before the NATO summit began the following morning. She never arrived. At 1412 hours, the base emergency alert system activated, sirens wailing across the installation. Rebecca was crossing the parade ground when the first shots rang out, precise, disciplined fire from multiple positions. She immediately sought cover behind a concrete memorial, assessing the situation. Through the growing chaos, she observed armed men in U.S. military uniforms moving with tactical precision between buildings. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful to be defensive reactions. These were the attackers disguised as American personnel. Her radio crackled with frantic transmissions. Taking fire at the command center. Multiple hostiles in Sector 4. Casualties at the barracks need immediate medical. Rebecca keyed her radio. Control, this is Morgan. Hostiles are wearing U.S. uniforms. Repeat, attackers in American uniforms. Copy, Morgan, came Colonel Miller's voice, strained but controlled. Report to the observation tower immediately. We need eyes on the entire complex. Rebecca moved quickly but cautiously, using cover and concealment techniques honed through years of training and combat experience. She noted with growing concern that the attackers were systematically targeting communication nodes and security positions. They had detailed knowledge of the base layout and security protocols. When she reached the observation tower, she found Colonel Walter Crawford, a 72-year-old World War II veteran who served as Fort Benning's historical advisor, and Master Sergeant Robert Jackson, a 59-year-old Vietnam veteran who ran the base shooting complex. Situation critical, Crawford said without preamble. We have 15 confirmed hostiles, heavily armed, moving with military precision. They've already killed 12 of our people and wounded at least 18 others. All communications with the outside world have been cut. The NATO delegation is trapped in the conference building. Where are our snipers? Rebecca asked, immediately thinking of the SEAL and Ranger sniper teams on base. Deployed to the remote training area for a pre-summit exercise, Jackson explained grimly. It'll take them at least 2 hours to return, even if they've received word of the attack. Crawford gestured to a weapon case. That's why we called you. The case contained a Barrett M82A1 50 caliber sniper rifle, one of the most powerful precision weapons in the American military inventory. The weapon was capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters, but required extraordinary skill to employ effectively under combat conditions. We need you to eliminate these threats, Crawford said, his aged face set with determination. 15 targets, ranges from 600 to 1,400 meters. Weather conditions are deteriorating. You have approximately 90 seconds per engagement before they reach critical areas. Rebecca examined the weapon, checking the scope settings, ammunition specifications, and environmental factors that would affect bullet trajectory over extreme distances. The Barrett was a massive rifle weighing nearly 30 pounds, with recoil that could dislocate a shoulder if improperly handled. Its 50 BMG ammunition, originally designed for heavy machine guns, delivered tremendous energy on target, but required precise calculations for accurate placement at extreme ranges. I need current weather data and detailed information about each target's position and movement, she said. Jackson handed her a tactical tablet showing real-time intelligence gathered from the few functioning security cameras. First target is on the administration building roof, 847 meters from here. He's got a clear shot at the evacuation route from the conference center. Rebecca studied the information, recognizing immediately that the attackers had positioned themselves with tactical precision to control key areas of the base. This was no random terrorist attack. This was a carefully orchestrated military operation designed to trap and eliminate high-value personnel. As she prepared her firing position, Rebecca glanced at one of the camera feeds and froze. The image showed a clear view of one of the attackers directing others from a covered position near the motor pool. Despite the distance and the man's partial concealment, she recognized him immediately. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Blackwood, former SEAL training instructor, who had personally rejected her second application with the comment, "Women have no place in combat operations regardless of individual capabilities." Although, this was the third twist of fate, the realization that this wasn't just a terrorist attack. This was something far more complex, potentially connected to the shadowy society she had discovered. Rebecca pushed the implications aside, focusing entirely on the immediate threat. She settled behind the Barrett, adjusting her position and breathing rhythm. The first target was in her crosshairs, adjustments made for wind and distance. She exhaled half her breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The 50 caliber round traveled 847 meters in approximately 1.2 seconds, striking the target center mass. The attacker dropped immediately. Target 1 neutralized, Rebecca reported, already shifting to acquire her second target. The second target was positioned in a second-story window of the logistics building, 27 meters away. This position commanded the helicopter landing zone where medical evacuations would need to occur. The range required maximum precision to avoid collateral damage to nearby American forces. Rebecca calculated the shot geometry, accounting for increased distance and a crosswind that had strengthened in the past minute. She waited for the perfect moment when the attacker moved into full view, then fired. Target 2 neutralized, she reported 1.3 seconds later. Over the next 20 minutes, Rebecca systematically engaged targets 3 through 8 each and requiring complex calculations for distance, wind conditions, atmospheric pressure, and target movement. Each shot was perfect, 1 round, 1 elimination, 0 collateral damage. "You're doing impossible work out there," Colonel Crawford transmitted after her 8th successful engagement. The situation was evolving rapidly. The remaining attackers had realized they were being hunted by a precision shooter and had adapted their movements using cover and concealment techniques that made targeting exponentially more difficult. Target 9 required Rebecca to thread her shot through a gap barely 12 inches wide at a range of 189 meters. The angle was severe, the target exposure minimal, and the margin for error non-existent. As she prepared the shot, Rebecca noticed something through her scope that wasn't visible on the security cameras. The attacker was attempting to access what appeared to be a hidden door in the wall of the administration building, a door that didn't appear on any of the base maps she had studied. She filed this information away, focusing on the immediate threat. The shot was perfect, eliminating the target through a precision that would have challenged the world's most capable snipers. 9 down, 6 to go, she reported. The final 6 targets had concentrated themselves in positions that provided mutual covering fire while minimizing their exposure. Rebecca realized she would need to engage them in rapid sequence to prevent the survivors from repositioning or escaping. Targets 10 through 12 required extraordinary precision and timing shots through narrow gaps during brief moments of exposure at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Rebecca engaged each with methodical efficiency, demonstrating capabilities that defied conventional understanding of human performance limits. 3 targets remaining, Crawford transmitted. They're trying to escape through the eastern perimeter. The final 3 attackers had abandoned their mission and were attempting to flee the base. Rebecca tracked them across open ground, requiring her to lead moving targets at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, among the most difficult shots in snipercraft. Target 13 won more to 145 meters, moving at approximately 8 miles across her field of fire. Rebecca calculated the lead time required and placed her shot precisely where the attacker would be when the bullet arrived. Perfect hit. Target 14 won, 287 meters moving target using cover and concealment techniques. Rebecca waited for the moment when the attacker would be most exposed, then delivered a shot that eliminated the threat with surgical precision. Target 15, the final attacker, presented the ultimate challenge, a moving target at 356 meters, in deteriorating light conditions now with rain beginning to fall. This would be the shot that defined Rebecca Morgan's place in military history. She calculated every variable that would affect the bullet's trajectory over the 356-meter distance, wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure variations, the slight downward angle, the target's movement speed and direction. She controlled her breathing, allowing her physiological systems to achieve the perfect stillness that precision shooting required. The crosshairs tracked the moving target, calculating the precise moment when all variables would align for a successful engagement. Rebecca exhaled, held her breath, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled for 1.44 seconds before finding its target, eliminating the final attacker with a shot that would be analyzed and studied by military marksmanship experts for decades to come. All targets neutralized, Rebecca transmitted. Threat eliminated. The silence that followed was broken by cheers from American personnel throughout the facility who had been trapped by the attack. Rebecca had single-handedly neutralized a coordinated assault using precision shooting capabilities that demonstrated mastery of skills that the military had claimed women could not develop. As security teams secured the base and medical personnel treated the wounded, Rebecca remained at her post, monitoring for any additional threats. The Barrett rifle felt warm in her hands, a testament to the 15 perfect shots that had just changed everything. What she didn't yet realize was that those 15 shots had not only saved lives, they had shattered barriers that had prevented women from serving in roles where their capabilities could contribute to national security at the highest levels. The engagement would become a case study taught throughout the military, demonstrating that individual performance under pressure was the only meaningful measure of qualification for elite military units. But the full implications of her actions and the conspiracy behind the attack were yet to be revealed. The aftermath of the attack unfolded in controlled chaos. Medics rushed to treat the wounded, while security teams established a defensive perimeter around Fort Benning. Military police secured the bodies of the 15 attackers Rebecca had eliminated, preserving evidence for what would inevitably become a high-priority investigation. Rebecca remained in the observation tower, the Barrett M82A1 still warm in her hands. The statistical impossibility of what she had just accomplished hadn't yet registered 15 shots, 15 kills at distances that pushed the theoretical limits of the weapon system, all under combat conditions with deteriorating weather. Colonel Crawford studied the tactical display showing confirmed kills marked with red X's across the base map. "I've been in the military for 50 years, he said quietly. "Never seen anything like this." "Agreed, Master Sergeant," Jackson added. "Not in Vietnam, not anywhere." Rebecca methodically broke down the Barrett, cleaning each component with practiced precision. The ritual helped maintain her focus as adrenaline began to subside. "We need to understand who they were and how they infiltrated the base," she said. Crawford nodded. "Military police are collecting IDs and equipment. Preliminary reports indicate the attackers were wearing authentic uniforms with proper insignia. They had valid base credentials." "Inside job?" Rebecca asked. "Appears so. The question is, how deep does it go?" Rebecca thought of Lieutenant Colonel Blackwood, the former SEAL instructor she'd recognized among the attackers. His presence suggested something far more complex than a simple terrorist operation. This had the hallmarks of a coordinated strike by American military personnel against their own colleagues. "Sir," she said to Crawford, "I recognized one of the attackers. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Blackwood, former SEAL training instructor." Crawford's weathered face registered shock. "Blackwood, he's scheduled to attend the NATO summit tomorrow. He's the liaison between Naval Special Warfare and the Counterterrorism Task Force." "Not anymore," Jackson said grimly. The radio crackled with Colonel Miller's voice. "Crawford, is Morgan with you?" "Affirmative." "Keep her there. Pentagon representatives are inbound. ETA 30 minutes. This just went above all our pay grades." Rebecca exchanged glances with Crawford. Pentagon involvement meant the situation had escalated to the highest levels of military authority. Something about this attack, or perhaps her response to it, had triggered extraordinary attention. "What exactly did I just step into?" she asked quietly. Crawford's expression was grave. "I don't know, Staff Sergeant, but I suspect we're about to find out." 6 hours after the attack, Rebecca found herself in a secure conference room deep within Fort Benning's command center. The walls were lined with monitors displaying security footage of her precision shooting performance. Military officials studied the recordings with intense interest, replaying critical moments in slow motion. Across the table sat Major General Howard Westfield, Deputy Director of Special Operations Command, Colonel James Miller, her mentor, and a stern-faced woman in civilian clothes who had been introduced only as Ms. Sullivan, Department of Defense. "Staff Sergeant Morgan," General Westfield began, "we've reviewed the preliminary data from today's incident. 15 confirmed eliminations at ranges between 87 and 1,356 meters using the Barrett M82A1 platform under adverse weather conditions. 0 misses, 0 collateral damage. Mission accomplished with minimal resources." He paused, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "Care to explain how that's possible?" Rebecca met his gaze. "Training, sir, and favorable conditions for the weapons system." "Favorable?" Sullivan interjected, her tone skeptical. "Our ballistics experts have already determined that at least 7 of those shots should have been virtually impossible, given the wind conditions and visibility." "With respect, ma'am, virtually impossible still leaves room for possibility." Miller suppressed a smile. Westfield did not. "Morgan," the general continued, "what we're trying to understand is whether your performance today represents an anomaly or a replicable capability." "It's replicable, sir. My qualification scores demonstrate consistent performance at these ranges." Westfield exchanged glances with Sullivan. "That's what we thought." He slid a folder across the table. "The men you eliminated weren't terrorists, Morgan. They were American military personnel, all with distinguished service records. Rebecca opened the folder, reviewing photographs and service summaries of the 15 attackers. All were veterans of special operations units. All had combat experience, and all had connections to various military training programs. The Society for Military Tradition, she said, recognizing the pattern. Sullivan's eyebrows raised. You're familiar with this organization? Rebecca explained what she had overheard at the abandoned gas station, the conversation about Operation Guardian and efforts to block women from special operations roles. She described recognizing Lieutenant Colonel Blackwood among the attackers. We've been monitoring this group for some time, Sullivan acknowledged. They began as a social club for traditional-minded officers but evolved into something more extreme. They view themselves as protecting military values from what they call social engineering. By attacking a NATO summit, Rebecca asked incredulously. The summit was their perfect target, Miller explained. By eliminating key special operations commanders and NATO officials, they believed they could derail multinational integration efforts, including gender integration programs already underway in British and Canadian special forces. Westfield leaned forward. What we don't understand is how they knew about the summit's security protocols. The attack pattern shows detailed knowledge of our defensive posture communication systems and emergency procedures. Someone high up, Rebecca suggested. Someone with access to the security planning. Sullivan nodded. That's our assessment as well. Which brings us to a delicate situation. She opened her own folder. We've traced communications between Blackwood and several senior officials at Naval Special Warfare Command, the same command that rejected your SEAL training applications. This was the fourth twist of fate, the realization that Rebecca's personal struggle against discrimination had intersected with a broader conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military leadership. Are you suggesting my rejections were part of this conspiracy? Rebecca asked. We believe your rejections were symptomatic of the problem, Sullivan replied carefully. The society has systematically worked to maintain traditional gender restrictions across special operations communities. Your applications represented a direct challenge to their agenda. General Westfield cleared his throat. Staff Sergeant Morgan, your actions today didn't just save lives. They've provided us with an opportunity to address a cancer within our special operations community, officers who place ideology above mission effectiveness and personal prejudice above demonstrated capability. What happens now? Rebecca asked. Now, Sullivan said, we need you to help us expose the full extent of this network, beginning with a visit to Naval Special Warfare Command. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter thundered through the night sky, its rotors slicing through rain clouds as it carried Rebecca and a team of military investigators toward Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, home of Naval Special Warfare Command and the SEAL training facility. Rebecca stared out the window, watching lightning illuminate the landscape below. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal, from instructor to combat sniper to key figure in a military conspiracy investigation. She wondered if her grandfather had experienced similar moments during his work with the Project Artemis, when military necessity suddenly overcame institutional barriers. Seated across from her, Ms. Sullivan studied documents on a secure tablet. You should know, she said without looking up, that what we're doing isn't official yet. The Pentagon is still determining how to handle this situation without undermining public confidence in special operations leadership. Meaning, Rebecca asked. Meaning we're walking into a politically sensitive environment. Some of the officers we're investigating have powerful connections in Washington. Rebecca nodded, understanding the implications. The military hierarchy was deeply intertwined with political power structures. Exposing corruption within special operations leadership would inevitably create resistance from those whose careers and reputations were at stake. This isn't just about getting me into SEAL training, Rebecca said after a moment. It's about integrity in the entire selection system. Precisely, Sullivan agreed, which is why this operation must be handled delicately. The helicopter began its descent toward Coronado, the lights of San Diego glittering across the bay. Rebecca felt a strange mixture of anticipation and apprehension. For years, she had dreamed of coming to this facility as a SEAL candidate. Now she arrived as something entirely different, a living challenge to everything the society had worked to preserve. As they approached the landing zone, Sullivan received an urgent transmission. Her expression darkened as she listened. Change of plans, she announced. We've received intelligence that key members of the society at Coronado are destroying documents. We need to move quickly. Upon landing, they were met by Admiral Samuel Richardson, commander of Naval Special Warfare, and a security detail composed of SEAL Team 6 operators, the most elite counterterrorism unit in the American military. The Admiral's presence signaled the gravity of the situation. Staff Sergeant Morgan, Richardson greeted her with a firm handshake. Your reputation precedes you. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Richardson replied grimly. We have a complex situation unfolding. 3 officers connected to Lieutenant Colonel Blackwood have barricaded themselves in the secured archives section. They're destroying records as we speak. Sullivan cursed under her breath. Operation Guardian Files. Among others, they've disabled the fire suppression system and threatened to burn the entire archive if we attempt entry. Rebecca studied the Admiral's expression. You want me to help? Richardson nodded. The archives building has a particular vulnerability, a single approach vector from the northern watchtower that might allow a precision shooter to neutralize the threat without endangering the documents. What's the range? Rebecca asked. Approximately 100 meters through 2 sets of reinforced windows with winds coming off the Pacific at variable speeds. Sullivan interjected. Admiral, that shot is precisely why we brought Staff Sergeant Morgan, Richardson finished. After reviewing the Fort Benning footage, I believe she's the only person who can make this shot. 20 minutes later, Rebecca lay prone on the northern watchtower platform, the Barrett M82A1 positioned before her. Through the scope, she could see 3 figures moving inside the archives, building, piling documents, and pouring what appeared to be accelerant. Targets identified, she reported through her headset. 3 subjects, all armed, actively destroying documents. Can you neutralize them without damaging the archives? Admiral Richardson asked from the command post. Rebecca calculated the shot parameters. The distance was manageable, but the angle required her to fire through 2 sets of windows, the exterior bulletproof glass of the archives building, and an interior office partition. The bullet would need to maintain enough energy after these penetrations to neutralize the target, yet not continue through to the document storage area. I need 50 caliber Rofos rounds, she said, referring to a specialized multi-purpose ammunition. Those are restricted for anti-material use only, came the response. The first barrier is bulletproof glass that makes it material, not personnel. The round will fragment after the second barrier, reducing over-penetration risk. A tense pause followed before Admiral Richardson replied, Approved. Ordnance is inbound. While waiting for the specialized ammunition, Rebecca observed the targets through her scope, memorizing their movement patterns. All 3 were methodical military in their precision. These weren't terrorists or extremists in the conventional sense. They were decorated officers who believed they were protecting military traditions. The Rofos rounds arrived specialized multi-phase ammunition designed to penetrate hardened targets before delivering their effect. Rebecca loaded one, carefully recalculating her shot parameters to account for the round's different ballistic properties. I have the solution, she reported. Request permission to engage. You have 3 targets, Richardson reminded her. Can you neutralize all 3 before they respond? Rebecca had anticipated this question. Negative. After the first shot, they'll have approximately 3 seconds to react. I need a distraction for the second and third shots. Recommendations. Flashbang at the main entrance timed exactly 3 seconds after my first shot. That should disorient them long enough for me to acquire and engage the remaining targets. The plan was approved. Rebecca settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing as she had done countless times before. The primary target moved into optimal position, momentarily stationary, as he organized documents. Executing, she announced, and squeezed the trigger. The Rofos round covered the 100 meters in just over a second, penetrated the exterior. Bulletproof glass continued through the interior partition and neutralized the primary target with devastating efficiency. Exactly 3 seconds later, flashbang grenades detonated at the archive's main entrance. Rebecca had already acquired her second target, who had turned toward the fallen officer. The shot was perfect, another clean neutralization through the hole created by her first round. The third target had begun moving toward the document piles, likely intending to ignite them before being captured. Rebecca tracked his movement, led the target appropriately, and fired her third shot. The round missed by centimeters, impacting the wall behind the target. Rebecca's heart rate spiked her first miss. She rapidly reacquired, compensating for the target's changed movement pattern, and fired again. This time, the round found its mark, dropping the officer mere inches from the accelerant-soaked documents. All three targets neutralized. She reported, her voice betraying no sign of the momentary failure. Archives secured. Through her scope, she watched as SEAL team operators breached the building, securing the fallen officers and the endangered documents. Her mission was complete, but the slight imperfection of that third shot lingered in her mind, a reminder that even the most skilled operator remained human, subject to error under pressure. This was the fifth twist of fate, the discovery that the archives contained not just operational records, but evidence of a systematic effort to manipulate military testing standards, specifically to exclude women from combat roles, regardless of individual capabilities. Dawn broke over Coronado as Rebecca sat in Admiral Richardson's office reviewing the documents recovered from the archives. The evidence was damning: internal memos detailing how physical standards had been selectively modified, not based on operational requirements, but specifically to maintain gender barriers. Most disturbing were records of Operation Artemis Suppression, a coordinated effort beginning in 1973 to erase all evidence of the successful female sniper program Rebecca had discovered in her grandfather's journals. The society had systematically removed references to Artemis from military history, buried records, and even monitored the families of former participants to intercept any attempts to preserve this legacy. They were afraid, Rebecca realized aloud. Afraid that if Artemis became known, it would undermine their entire argument against women in special operations. Admiral Richardson nodded grimly. The performance of the Artemis operators contradicted their fundamental claim that women lack the physical and psychological capability for special operations work. The office door opened, and Ms. Sullivan entered with a secure tablet. We've completed preliminary analysis of the recovered documents. The conspiracy extends to 17 senior officers across 4 branches of service, including 3 generals and 2 admirals. Including anyone in this command? Richardson asked. Sullivan nodded. Commander William Steele, Director of SEAL Training. He personally flagged Staff Sergeant Morgan's applications for rejection, overriding the standard evaluation process. Rebecca recognized the name immediately. Commander Steele was renowned for maintaining the SEAL training program's legendary difficulty, a man whose dedication to standards was celebrated throughout the special operations community. Where is Steele now? Richardson asked. Scheduled to oversee this morning's BUDS training evolution. Phase 1 candidates begin Hell Week today. Richardson's expression hardened. I want him detained for questioning. With respect, Admiral, Rebecca interjected. Immediate detention might alert others in the network. If Steele is connected to the society, his sudden removal could trigger document destruction at other commands. Sullivan considered this. What do you suggest? Let me enter SEAL training, Rebecca proposed. Today, under Steele's supervision. Richardson and Sullivan exchanged surprised glances. Placing you in SEAL training would be unprecedented, the Admiral said carefully. So was shooting 15 terrorists at Fort Benning, Rebecca countered. Sir, this isn't just about me anymore. This is about exposing a conspiracy that has compromised military effectiveness by placing ideology above capability. And how would your presence in training accomplish this? Steele will be forced to either accept my participation tacitly, acknowledging that women can meet SEAL standards, or publicly oppose it, revealing his connection to the society. Either way, we gain leverage to extract information about the broader network. It's an enormous risk, Admiral Richardson said, pacing near the window. If you fail during training, it would reinforce every argument the society has made about female capability. The statement hung in the air, a challenge that Rebecca couldn't ignore. Are you suggesting I might not be capable of completing the training, Admiral? I'm suggesting that SEAL Hell Week has a 70% attrition rate among men who've spent months preparing specifically for it. You'd be entering with no specialized preparation after 24 hours without sleep following a high-stress combat engagement. Rebecca felt a flicker of doubt, the first since the attack at Fort Benning. The Admiral's assessment was logical. SEAL training represented the most physically demanding selection program in the military. Even with her exceptional fitness and determination, success was far from guaranteed. "I understand the risk, sir," she said finally, "but this may be our only opportunity to expose the society's influence within special operations selection. If I fail as an individual, but the evidence we've gathered will still stand." Sullivan's expression shifted from skepticism to consideration. "It's unorthodox, but it could work." Steele's reaction would be revealing. Admiral Richardson walked to the window, gazing out at the SEAL training compound, where candidates were already gathering for the day's evolution. The political fallout would be significant. "With respect, sir," Rebecca said, "we're already facing political fallout from a conspiracy within our special operations leadership. The question is whether we control the narrative or let it control us." After a long moment, Richardson turned back. "Very well, Staff Sergeant Morgan. As of this moment, you are temporarily assigned to Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, Class 170, as part of a comprehensive security investigation. Report to the quarterdeck in 1 hour." As Rebecca turned to leave, Richardson added, "Morgan, you realize what you're walking into, don't you? Hell Week isn't called that for nothing. The instructors will test you beyond anything you've experienced, and that's before considering Steele's potential influence." "I understand, sir," Rebecca replied, though privately she wondered if anyone truly could understand Hell Week without experiencing it firsthand. This was the sixth twist of fate. Rebecca's extraordinary shooting performance had opened a door previously welded shut, allowing her to directly confront the system that had repeatedly rejected her. But passing through that door would require more than marksmanship skills. It would demand endurance, resilience, and determination at levels few humans ever achieve. The SEAL training compound at Coronado existed as a world unto itself, a crucible designed to identify and eliminate all but the most determined candidates. The oceanfront facility featured obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and the infamous grinder, where generations of SEAL hopefuls had been pushed beyond normal human endurance. Rebecca approached in standard Navy PT uniform, her hair secured according to regulations. She carried nothing except orders, signed by Admiral Richardson himself, orders that would send shockwaves through the SEAL community. As she neared the quarterdeck where Class 170 had assembled, conversations stopped. 80 men in identical uniforms turned to stare at the woman walking confidently toward their formation. Instructors exchanged confused glances, uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented development. Commander William Steele emerged from the instructor building, his weathered face registering first confusion, then recognition, and finally carefully controlled anger as Rebecca approached and rendered a perfect military salute. "Staff Sergeant Morgan reporting as ordered, sir." Steele accepted her written orders, scanning them with increasing disbelief. "This is a regular Staff Sergeant." "Yes, sir. So was the attack on Fort Benning yesterday." Steele's eyes narrowed at the reference. "You believe there's a connection between that terrorist action and SEAL training?" "I believe Admiral Richardson's orders are clear, sir. I'm to participate in Phase 1 training effective immediately as part of an ongoing security investigation." The training cadre and candidates watched this exchange with rapt attention. The arrival of a female candidate, particularly one whose orders came directly from the commander of Naval Special Warfare, represented a seismic disruption to SEAL tradition. Steele studied Rebecca's face, searching for weakness or uncertainty. He found neither. After a tense moment, he returned her orders. "Very well. Fall in with the class Staff Sergeant. Phase 1 commences in 5 minutes. As Rebecca took her position in formation, she noted the reactions of the male candidates. Some curious, others openly hostile, a few attempting to maintain professional neutrality. One particularly large candidate, whose name tag identified him as Petty Officer Martinez, deliberately bumped into her as they lined up. "This isn't Girl Scout camp," he muttered. "You won't last an hour." Rebecca maintained her position, saying nothing. This reaction was expected. SEAL candidates were highly competitive, and many would view her presence as a threat to the exclusivity of their aspired community. The day's training began with the traditional Welcome to Hell Week, a brutal physical assessment designed to induce immediate voluntary withdrawals. Candidates rotated through stations of push-ups, pull-ups, and flutter kicks, all while being drenched with cold water and subjected to sensory overload from smoke grenades and recorded battlefield sounds. Rebecca performed each evolution perfectly, meeting every standard without hesitation. Her physical preparation had been thorough, her determination absolute. When instructors shouted for 20 more, she delivered 30. When they ordered the class into the 50-degree ocean, she was among the first to enter and the last to show signs of cold stress. 4 hours into the evolution, Rebecca began to understand why Hell Week deserved its reputation. The continuous physical demands were designed to induce cumulative fatigue. No single exercise was impossible, but the relentless sequence without rest created extraordinary stress. Already her muscles burned with lactic acid, her joints ached from the constant impact, and the perpetual cold had begun to affect her fine motor control. Instructor Wilson, a senior chief with 15 years of SEAL experience, seemed particularly focused on finding Rebecca's breaking point. He ordered her to carry a rubber boat on her head while performing lunges across the beach, a task normally assigned to six-person teams. "Too heavy, Morgan," he shouted when she momentarily adjusted the boat's position. "No, instructor," she responded, continuing the evolution despite the crushing weight. By midday, 15 candidates had quit ringing the brass bell that signified surrender. Rebecca remained methodically completing each task despite the instructor's increasingly creative attempts to induce failure. Commander Steele observed from a distance, his expression unreadable. During a brief transition between evolutions, he approached the instructor, supervising Rebecca's group. "How is our guest performing?" he asked, voice pitched low. "Meeting all standards, sir," the instructor replied reluctantly. Her times on the obstacle course were in the top quartile. Steele's jaw tightened. "Increase the difficulty. I want her tested beyond standard parameters." "Sir, that would violate training protocols. All candidates must face identical challenges." "This isn't a standard situation, Chief. Follow my orders." The instructor hesitated, visibly uncomfortable with the directive. "Commander, with respect, such actions might validate concerns about evaluation bias. Perhaps we should consult with Admiral Richardson before implementing non-standard assessments." Steele's expression darkened. "Are you questioning my authority, Chief?" "No, sir. I'm ensuring we maintain the integrity of the selection process. Isn't that what SEAL training is ultimately about? Equal standards fairly applied." This exchange confirmed Rebecca's suspicions. Steele was attempting to create conditions that would force her failure regardless of actual performance. His willingness to compromise training integrity revealed his true priorities. As afternoon transitioned to evening, the remaining candidates were ordered into combat rubber raiding craft for a nighttime ocean evolution. These heavy boats, designed to be carried and operated by 8-person teams, represented one of SEAL training's most physically demanding challenges. Rebecca was assigned to a boat crew led by Petty Officer Martinez, who made no effort to hide his resentment. "Try to keep up," he said as they prepared to launch into the surf. "I won't have my team fail because of you." The evolution required teams to paddle their craft through breaking waves, navigate to a series of offshore checkpoints, then return to beach and carry the boats inland to the next launch point. It demanded not just strength, but precise teamwork and communication. Rebecca's arms burned with fatigue as she paddled in rhythm with her team. 20 hours without sleep had begun to affect her coordination, and the constant exposure to cold water had sapped her body's energy reserves. For the first time, she felt genuine doubt about her ability to complete Hell Week. Martinez noticed her momentary struggle. "Getting tired already. We're not even 24 hours in." "I'm fine," Rebecca replied, forcing her arms to maintain the paddling cadence. "Sure you are," Martinez scoffed. "This is why women don't belong here. Biology doesn't care about your politics." Another team member, Petty Officer Rodriguez, interjected. "Shut up and paddle, Martinez. We're falling behind the other boats." As they approached the most distant checkpoint 2 miles offshore, Rebecca noticed something concerning their boat had been directed away from the main group toward an area where powerful swells were creating dangerous conditions. Through the darkness, she could see that no other teams had been sent in this direction. "This isn't the standard course," she said to Martinez. "We're heading into the rip current zone." Martinez frowned, checking their position. "You're right. These waters are off limits after dark." He turned to their accompanying instructor. "Sir, we're outside the safety perimeter. Request permission to return to standard operating area." The instructor hesitated, torn between training safety protocols and his commander's direct order. Before he could respond, Rebecca spoke up. "We need to angle 45 degrees into the current in power stroke to break free. Standard recovery won't work against this flow." Her analysis was correct, a textbook application of maritime tactics that the male candidates recognized immediately. Without waiting for formal direction, the team implemented her approach, successfully navigating away from danger. As they fought against the current, Martinez glanced at Rebecca with new assessment in his eyes. "Not bad, Morgan. Where'd you learn small boat handling?" "3 weeks with Marine Recon in the Persian Gulf," she replied between strokes. "Sometimes the people trying to kill you are more dangerous than the water." The shared danger began to shift the team dynamic. When they finally returned to shore, exhausted from fighting the rip current, Martinez acknowledged Rebecca with a nod that conveyed, if not acceptance, at least diminished hostility. Upon returning to the training area, the boat crew's leader reported the incident to the safety officer, a standard procedure when training parameters are breached. This report quickly reached Admiral Richardson, who had been monitoring the training evolution from the command center. This was the seventh twist of fate. Commander Steele's desperate attempt to force Rebecca's failure had instead revealed his willingness to compromise safety protocols and training integrity to preserve gender barriers. More significantly, it had begun to bridge the gap between Rebecca and her male counterparts, who now recognized her not as a political symbol, but as a capable team member under duress. Admiral Richardson summoned Steele to his office immediately. The confrontation was brief and decisive. "Commander, you deliberately placed candidates in danger by operating outside established safety parameters. Explain yourself." Steele stood at rigid attention. "Sir, special operations often requires adaptation to unexpected conditions. I was testing the candidate's response to an authentic maritime emergency. Without proper safety measures or notification to training command." Richardson's tone was ice. "That's not training, Commander. That's sabotage. With respect, Admiral, my responsibility is to maintain the standards that have produced the world's premier special operations force. Introducing variables that compromise those standards is not something I can support." "Variables," Richardson repeated. "You mean Staff Sergeant Morgan, the woman who single-handedly neutralized 15 attackers at Fort Benning, the woman who made 3 impossible shots to secure our archives last night. That variable." Steele's composure cracked slightly. "Her presence is politically motivated, sir. A social experiment that risks operational effectiveness. Is that your assessment, Commander, or the Society's?" The question landed like a physical blow. Steele's expression revealed momentary shock before his training reasserted control. "I don't know what you're referring to, Admiral." Richardson opened a folder on his desk. "We've recovered documents from the Archives, Commander. Documents detailing your involvement in Operation Guardian and systematic efforts to exclude qualified female candidates from special operations training." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Steele's face. "Sir, those documents are being misinterpreted. My concerns are purely operational. Save it for your legal counsel, Commander. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately, pending investigation for conspiracy endangerment of personnel and violations of military equal opportunity policies." As security personnel escorted Steele from the building, Richardson turned to Rebecca, who had witnessed the confrontation from the doorway. Her uniform was still damp from the ocean evolution, her face showing the strain of 24 hours of continuous physical exertion. "Staff Sergeant Morgan, I owe you an apology. The institution failed to evaluate you, fairly failed to recognize your extraordinary capabilities, and failed to uphold the meritocratic principles we claim to value." Rebecca maintained her professional demeanor despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, sir. What happens now?" "That," Richardson said, "depends on you. You have completed 1 day of Hell Week, the most physically demanding day. You've met or exceeded every standard. By rights, you've earned the opportunity to continue." "Are you offering me a place in SEAL training, Admiral, officially?" Richardson nodded. "I am, but I'm also offering you something potentially more significant. The Society's network extends beyond naval special warfare. We need someone with your unique combination of skills and perspective to help dismantle it, someone who understands both the operational imperatives and the institutional barriers." Rebecca considered this. The path forward divided between personal ambition, completing SEAL training, and becoming the first female operator, in a broader mission to transform the culture that had created these barriers in the first place. "With respect, sir, I believe I can do both." Richardson smiled for the first time. "I was hoping you'd say that." As Rebecca prepared to return to training, Sullivan intercepted her. "Morgan, there's something you should know. We've identified a classified facility beneath the Coronado compound, something called Project Chimera. It appears to be the Society's primary research center." Rebecca remembered what she had observed during the Fort Benning attack, the terrorist attempting to access a hidden door that didn't appear on official maps. "At Benning, I saw something similar, a concealed entrance in the administration building." Sullivan nodded. "These hidden facilities exist at multiple military installations. The Society has been operating in shadows for decades, building infrastructure outside official channels." "What's in the Chimera facility?" "We don't know yet. Security protocols prevent remote access. We need someone to physically infiltrate and gather intelligence." Rebecca understood immediately. "You want me to investigate while continuing SEAL training?" "Only if you believe you can handle both missions simultaneously," Sullivan cautioned. "Hell Week alone would break most operators. Adding clandestine intelligence gathering would be unprecedented." Rebecca felt the weight of compounded fatigue in every muscle. Already she had pushed her body to its limits, and Hell Week had barely begun. Logic dictated that she choose one mission or the other, but logic hadn't guided her career thus far. Determination had. "I'll do it," she said simply. Dang, the dawn broke over Coronado Beach as Class 170 assembled for their second day of Hell Week. The candidates, exhausted from the previous day's evolutions, stood at attention as instructors prepared the morning's torments. Rebecca joined the formation, her presence now the subject of intense speculation throughout the special operations community. News of Commander Steele's relief and the emerging conspiracy had spread quickly, creating a volatile atmosphere of uncertainty and reassessment. The new training director, Captain Thomas Hayes, addressed the class. "Candidates, as you may have heard, Command has initiated significant changes in response to serious misconduct within the training cadre. These changes will not affect the standards you must meet, but they will ensure those standards are applied fairly and consistently to all candidates, including Staff Sergeant Morgan." He paused, scanning the formation. SEAL training has always been about one thing: identifying those with the character, capability, and commitment to succeed in the most demanding operational environments. Gender, race, background, none of these matter when you're underwater, under fire, or behind enemy lines. Performance is all that counts. The evolution began with the traditional surf torture candidates lying in the frigid Pacific surf zone while instructors demanded physical exercises between immersions. Rebecca endured alongside her male counterparts, neither requesting nor receiving any accommodation. 30 hours without sleep had begun to induce cognitive effects, time distortion, microsleeps during momentary pauses, and perceptual anomalies that made simple tasks increasingly difficult. Rebecca fought through these effects, drawing on mental discipline honed through years of training. During a log PT session where teams carried heavy telephone poles through obstacle courses, Rebecca found herself paired with Martinez and Rodriguez in a 6-person team. The weight of the log crushing down on her shoulders seemed to increase with each step as fatigue compromised her muscular endurance. "Morgan's failing," someone muttered as the team struggled through a mud pit. "No, she's not," Martinez responded unexpectedly. "Shift the weight, Adams. You're out of position." The redistribution made a critical difference, allowing Rebecca to maintain her position despite approaching her physical limits. This small act of teamwork from the candidate, who had initially been most hostile, represented a significant shift in dynamics. As the day progressed, something unexpected developed. The male candidates, initially skeptical of Rebecca's presence, began to accept her as simply another aspiring operator facing the same challenges. When one candidate struggled during a log PT session, Rebecca stepped in to support his position, demonstrating the teamwork essential to SEAL operations. By evening, as the class faced another night of sleep deprivation and physical demands, Rebecca had earned something more valuable than official acceptance, the respect of her peers based solely on performance. During a rare 5-minute break, Martinez approached her. "Morgan heard you're the one who took down those terrorists at Benning. 15 for 15. That true?" "Just doing my job," she replied. He nodded. "Same as all of us here, trying to earn the right to do that job at the highest level." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I was wrong earlier about you not belonging here." The simple acknowledgement meant more than any official recognition. It represented the beginning of acceptance based on demonstrated capability rather than preconceptions. That night, while Class 170 conducted maritime exercises offshore, Rebecca slipped away to fulfill her second mission, investigating the Chimera facility. Using the schematic recovered from Steele's files, she located a maintenance room containing an electrical panel that concealed a biometric scanner. The scanner presented an immediate obstacle designed to admit only authorized society members. However, Rebecca had anticipated this. Among the items recovered from Commander Steele's office was his service ID with fingerprint data. Using a specialized replication technique developed by intelligence services, she created a functional duplicate of Steele's fingerprint. The scanner accepted the false print, revealing a hidden elevator behind a sliding wall panel. Rebecca descended into darkness, uncertain what awaited in the society's secret domain. What she discovered exceeded all expectations: a comprehensive operations center with communications equipment, document storage, and most significantly, a fully equipped laboratory. The facility appeared designed for two purposes: maintaining the society's covert activities and conducting classified research. Rebecca methodically photographed everything, transmitting images to Sullivan's secure server. The laboratory contained equipment for biological and chemical analysis with particular focus on human performance metrics. Files labeled Physiological Determinants of Combat Effectiveness contained decades of research data. As Rebecca examined these documents, the true nature of Project Chimera became clear. The Society had been systematically manipulating research on human performance to support their gender exclusion policies. When actual data contradicted their positions, they simply buried the findings and produced falsified studies supporting their predetermined conclusions. Most disturbing were files specifically targeting female candidates who had demonstrated exceptional capabilities. The Society maintained detailed dossiers on women like Rebecca, those whose performance threatened their ideological position. These files included surveillance reports, manipulated evaluation metrics, and in some cases plans for career redirection through manufactured failures or selective deployment assignments. Rebecca's own file was extensive, beginning with her earliest marksmanship competitions and tracking her entire military career. The Society had identified her as a primary threat to gender segregation policies years before her SEAL applications. This was the eighth twist of fate, the discovery that Rebecca's struggle against discrimination hadn't been simply institutional inertia or traditional thinking, but an active conspiracy specifically targeting her and women like her, who demonstrated capabilities that contradicted the Society's fundamental claims. As she prepared to exit the facility, Rebecca heard the elevator activate. Someone was descending to the secret level. She quickly concealed herself behind storage cabinets, drawing her sidearm as the elevator doors opened. Two men entered, both wearing naval officer uniforms with the insignia of SEAL team commanders. They moved with the confident precision of experienced operators, immediately proceeding to the communications center. Sentinel protocol is authorized, the senior officer announced, activating a secure terminal. All nodes acknowledged. Commence data purge and facility sterilization. Rebecca recognized the implications immediately. The Society was initiating its contingency plan, destroying evidence across multiple facilities. This had to be stopped before crucial documentation was lost. She stepped from concealment, weapon raised. Naval Special Warfare Command, hands where I can see them. The officers turned, momentarily shocked by her presence. The senior officer recovered quickly, his hand moving toward his sidearm. I wouldn't, Rebecca warned. Building is surrounded, and Admiral Richardson is receiving this transmission live. She gestured to the camera on her tactical vest, a calculated bluff, but delivered with absolute conviction. The junior officer hesitated, but his commander maintained his composure. Staff Sergeant Morgan, I presume your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Captain Lawrence, former commanding officer of SEAL Team 3, current Deputy Director of Special Activities at the Society. Lawrence raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Well informed. However, you're interrupting a classified security protocol. I suggest you depart immediately before you compromise national security operations. The only thing being compromised here is the integrity of special operations selection, Rebecca countered. I've reviewed your research. Falsified data, manipulated studies, targeted interference with qualified candidates, all to maintain an ideology that places gender above capability. Lawrence's expression hardened. You fundamentally misunderstand our purpose, Morgan. This isn't about gender, it's about maintaining standards that ensure operational effectiveness. The battlefield doesn't forgive failure. I agree completely, Rebecca replied, which is why selection should be based solely on performance, not preconceived notions about who can perform. Lawrence's hand inched closer to his weapon. You think this is about equality? It's about biology, about thousands of years of human evolution that created physiological differences you can't legislate away with good intentions. I'm not interested in your philosophy, Captain. I'm interested in the evidence. This facility contains evidence of systematic manipulation designed to exclude qualified candidates based on factors unrelated to operational performance. The confrontation reached a critical juncture. Lawrence's expression shifted from confident authority to calculated assessment. You're alone down here, Morgan. No backup, no witnesses. You could have an unfortunate accident, another casualty of the notoriously dangerous SEAL training. Rebecca's weapon remained steady, but exhaustion from Hell Week had compromised her reaction time. She recognized the dangerous disadvantage facing two combat-experienced SEALs while operating on minimal sleep and maximal fatigue. You're wrong about the witnesses, she said, nodding toward the ceiling. Admiral Richardson insisted on backup. The facility is surrounded. Lawrence smiled thinly. A convincing bluff staff sergeant. But this facility has signal blocking technology. No transmission could reach the surface. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, Lawrence clearly calculating whether to risk attacking a fellow service member, Rebecca determining whether she could neutralize two operators despite her compromised condition. The tension broke with the sound of the elevator activating again. Lawrence's expression registered genuine surprise. Clearly, he hadn't expected additional visitors. The doors opened to reveal Admiral Richardson and a security team. Captain Lawrence, the Admiral said coldly, consider yourself relieved of duty and under arrest for conspiracy against the United States military. As the society officers were detained, Richardson surveyed the hidden facility with growing concern. How deep does this go, he wondered aloud. All the way to the top, sir, Rebecca answered, indicating the communications logs, showing connections to Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, and military commanders across multiple branches. The society isn't just a fringe group, it's an entrenched network that has shaped military policy for decades. Richardson's expression hardened. Then it's time we brought it into the light. As the security team secured the facility, Rebecca felt the accumulated fatigue of 36 hours without sleep threatening to overwhelm her. The dual challenges of Hell Week and clandestine investigation had pushed her to the absolute limits of human endurance. Richardson noticed her condition. Morgan, you need rest. We can handle this from here. Rebecca straightened, pushing back against the exhaustion. With respect, sir, I still have a Hell Week to complete. The Admiral studied her with new respect. You've already proven more than enough. No one would question if you withdrew for medical reasons after what you've accomplished. I would question it, sir, Rebecca replied simply. I didn't come this far to take the easy way out now. Richardson nodded, understanding. Very well, Staff Sergeant. Return to your class, but know that what you've discovered here tonight will change military selection processes forever. As Rebecca departed the secret facility, she knew the coming days would test her beyond anything she had yet experienced. Hell Week had barely begun, and the physical demands would only intensify. The society's influence extended far beyond Coronado, with powerful members still in positions to undermine her efforts. But for the first time in her military career, Rebecca Morgan wasn't fighting alone against an invisible barrier. The evidence she had uncovered would ensure that capability, not gender, would determine who could serve at the highest levels of special operations. The 15 shots she had fired at Fort Benning had started this journey. Her determination would see it through to completion, regardless of the curtain. The third day of Hell Week dawned with hammering rain and bone-chilling winds sweeping across Coronado Beach. Class 170 now reduced to fewer than 40 candidates from the original 80 assembled in ragged formation. Their faces showed the unmistakable signs of extreme sleep deprivation. 1,000-yard stares, micro-expressions of pain, and the peculiar hollow-cheeked appearance that comes from sustained physical exertion without adequate nutrition. Rebecca Morgan stood among them, her body a constellation of competing discomforts. 56 hours without sleep had induced a dreamlike state where reality seemed to waver at the edges of perception. Her muscles burned with the deep, persistent ache of accumulated micro-tears. The constant immersion in salt water had created abrasions that stung with every movement. The mental discipline required to function under these conditions demanded every ounce of her concentration. Captain Hayes studied the formation with clinical detachment. Day 3 candidates. Historically, this is where we separate those who merely want the trident from those who must have it. When your body fails, and it will fail, your mind must carry you forward. Rebecca felt the assessment in his gaze as it passed over her. Despite discovering the Chimera facility and uncovering crucial evidence against the society, she had returned to training without special accommodation. SEAL selection would maintain its integrity only if she completed the same evolutions as her male counterparts without exception or adjustment. Today's primary evolution, Hayes continued, will test your operational endurance. 12-mile coastal movement with full-gear obstacle courses at each checkpoint, culminating with the night infiltration exercise. Anyone who fails to maintain pace with their boat crew will be dropped from training. Martinez, now the unofficial leader of Rebecca's boat crew, glanced at her briefly. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. They would move as a unit, succeed or fail together. The fragile respect she had earned through shared suffering now translated into a tentative inclusion. The evolution began with each candidate carrying 60 pounds of equipment, plus their share of the team's rubber boat and tactical gear. For the male candidates, this represented approximately 30% of their body weight. For Rebecca, it approached 45%, a physiological disadvantage she would need to overcome through technique and determination. 2 miles into the movement, the physical differences began to manifest. Rebecca's shorter stride length required more steps to cover the same distance, multiplying the energy expenditure required. The weight distribution on her narrower shoulders created intense pressure points, where male candidates' broader frames distributed the load more efficiently. Martinez noticed her adjusting the straps on her pack. "Switch positions," he said quietly. "Take point. Shorter strides but faster pace. We'll match you." The tactical insight was sound. By taking the lead position, Rebecca could set a sustainable rhythm, rather than struggling to match the naturally longer stride of her male counterparts. The team adapted to her pace, finding a collective efficiency that kept them firmly in the middle of the class ranking. At the first checkpoint, instructors waited with the promised obstacle course, a brutal sequence of mud crawls, wall climbs, and log carries designed to exhaust already depleted candidates. Rebecca completed each obstacle methodically, focusing on technique rather than power where possible. On the 15-foot rope climb, her upper body strength initially faltered. Where the male candidates could power up using primarily arms, Rebecca needed to employ a technique using her legs as the primary driver. Slower but effective. "Morgan's struggling," observed one instructor to Hayes. "Is she meeting the time standard?" Hayes asked. "Yes, sir, just differently than the others." "Then she's not struggling. She's adapting. There's a difference." The distinction was significant. Hayes was evaluating performance outcomes rather than conformity to traditional methods. This represented exactly the paradigm shift Rebecca had sought throughout her military career. As the evolution continued, the weather deteriorated further. Hypothermia became a genuine risk as candidates alternated between intense exertion in static positions and driving rain and wind. The instructors monitored core temperatures, closely prepared to remove candidates whose safety became compromised. During a particularly grueling stretch along rocky coastline, candidate Rodriguez slipped on wet stones, twisting his ankle severely. The injury threatened to end his hell week immediately unless his boat crew could adapt. "I can continue," Rodriguez insisted, though his face betrayed the pain. "Not with full weight," Rebecca assessed. "We redistribute. Martinez take his portion of the boat. Smith and Wilson split his pack contents. I'll take his weapon and tactical gear." "You've already got a full load," Martinez objected. "I've carried wounded before," Rebecca replied simply. "Technique matters more than size." The redistribution added nearly 15 pounds to Rebecca's already substantial burden, pushing her to the absolute limits of her physical capacity. Each step became a conscious act of will rather than an automatic function. The pain in her shoulders evolved from sharp to burning to a strange numbness that was perhaps more concerning. 3 miles from the final checkpoint, Rebecca's vision began to narrow, a classic symptom of extreme fatigue and oxygen debt. The world contracted to a tunnel focused solely on the next step, then the next, with no capacity to consider anything beyond immediate survival. It was in this state, what SEAL candidates called the gray zone between consciousness and collapse, that Rebecca experienced something unexpected. The physical suffering receded slightly, replaced by perfect clarity about why she had pursued this path. This wasn't about proving women could become SEALs. It wasn't about breaking barriers or making history. Those were secondary effects, not primary motivations. At its core, this was about a principle her grandfather had expressed in his final Artemis journal entry: truth matters even when hidden. The truth was that human capability transcended the convenient categories used to organize society. The truth was that determination, skill, and adaptability mattered more than conformity to expectations. The truth was that excellence deserved recognition regardless of its source. This moment of clarity sustained Rebecca through the final miles. When Class 170 reached the endpoint, her boat crew finished 7th out of 12 solidly in the middle, having successfully adapted to injury and adversity. Captain Hayes made no special comment about their performance, which was perhaps the most significant statement of all. They were being evaluated as operators, not as categories or symbols. As the candidates prepared for the night infiltration exercise, Admiral Richardson appeared at the training site accompanied by a civilian. Rebecca didn't recognize a silver-haired man in an expensive suit with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Senator Mitchell, Hayes explained quietly to his instructors. Armed Services Committee, here to observe. The presence of a powerful Washington lawmaker at Hell Week was unprecedented. It signaled that the implications of the society investigation had reached the highest levels of government oversight. Rebecca caught fragments of conversation between Richardson and Mitchell as they observed the candidates preparing for the infiltration exercise. Remarkable discovery, Mitchell was saying. If verified, this conspiracy represents a significant breach of military integrity. The evidence is substantial, Richardson replied. Staff Sergeant Morgan's investigation of the Chimera facility provided documentation going back 3 decades. And yet she continues with SEAL training extraordinary commitment. She believes in finishing what she starts, Senator. Mitchell's eyes found Rebecca in the formation, his gaze calculating and cold despite his cordial tone. Something in that assessment triggered her instincts, a predator's evaluation rather than an observer's curiosity. The night infiltration exercise represented a different kind of challenge, a tactical scenario requiring stealth navigation and target discrimination under adverse conditions. Teams would move through enemy territory, simulated by instructors with paintball weapons, locate a specific objective, and extract without detection. Rebecca's team moved through the training course with practiced efficiency, using hand signals and maintaining noise discipline despite their exhaustion. When they encountered an instructor checkpoint, Martinez deferred to Rebecca for the tactical decision, a silent acknowledgement of her combat experience. Rebecca indicated a flanking approach through denser vegetation, avoiding the obvious route. The team followed her lead without hesitation, successfully bypassing the simulated enemy position. At the objective, a small building containing intelligence materials, they encountered an unexpected complication. The instructors had modified the scenario, adding a civilian element that required precise target discrimination before proceeding. Rebecca immediately recognized the test for what it was: an assessment of judgment under pressure, not just physical capability. She signaled for the team to hold position while she conducted a detailed observation, identifying which role players represented legitimate targets versus non-combatants. This caution allowed her team to complete the objective without the civilian casualties that plagued several other groups. When they returned to the extraction point, Hayes nodded with approval. Clean execution, he noted. No collateral damage, no detection, objective secured. As the 3rd day of Hell Week transitioned into the 4th, Senator Mitchell approached Rebecca during a rare 5-minute break. The candidates were performing weapons maintenance, a task requiring fine motor control that had become extraordinarily difficult after 60-plus hours without sleep. Staff Sergeant Morgan, Mitchell said, extending his hand. Senator James Mitchell, Armed Services Committee. Your discoveries at the Chimera facility have created quite a stir in Washington. Rebecca maintained her focus on the weapon disassembly. Just doing my job, Senator. 2 jobs, actually, Mitchell observed. SEAL candidate and military investigator simultaneously. Remarkable dedication. Rebecca didn't respond directly, recognizing the political complexity underlying the senator's interest. The society's influence likely extended into congressional staffs and committees, including potentially Mitchell's own. "Do you know why I'm here, Staff Sergeant?" Mitchell asked. "I imagine you're assessing the political implications of the society investigation, sir." Mitchell smiled slightly. "Perceptive. The Armed Services Committee needs to understand whether we're dealing with isolated misconduct or systemic failure in special operations selection. And your assessment so far." Mitchell's smile tightened, revealing something harder beneath the political veneer. "Let's just say I'm concerned about overreactions to what may be isolated incidents. The military's traditional standards have served us well for generations." The choice of words, traditional standards, echoed the society's rhetoric precisely. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet uniform. "Standards should serve mission effectiveness, sir, not tradition for tradition's sake," she replied carefully. Mitchell's expression hardened momentarily before he reassumed his political mask. "An interesting perspective. I'll be watching your progress with great interest, Staff Sergeant, as will many others in Washington." As Mitchell walked away, Rebecca noticed him approach Hayes and Richardson, engaging them in what appeared to be a forceful conversation. The senator's body language suggested disagreement with whatever the officers were saying. This was the ninth twist of fate, the realization that completing Hell Week successfully had become essential, not just for Rebecca's personal ambition, but for the broader cause of military selection reform. If she failed now, the society could claim vindication despite the evidence against them. And based on Mitchell's subtle hostility, she suspected he might be actively working toward that outcome. Dawn of the fourth day brought a new evolution, the infamous steel pier exercise, where candidates treaded water for hours while performing complex tasks with weights and equipment. This phase specifically tested upper body endurance, an area where physiological differences between males and females were most pronounced. Rebecca entered the cold water, knowing this would push her to absolute limits. While her cardiovascular efficiency and lower body strength compared favorably with her male counterparts' upper body muscle mass, represented her greatest physical disadvantage. The initial treading phase proved manageable. Rebecca's swimming background and efficient technique compensated for raw strength differences. But when instructors required candidates to hold 20-pound weights at arm's length, while treading, the physiological differences became apparent. After 15 minutes, her deltoids and trapezius muscles began to fail. Where male candidates could rely on greater muscle mass to distribute the load, Rebecca's smaller muscle groups approached complete exhaustion. Martinez, treading water nearby, noticed her struggle. "Technique change," he said quietly. "Micro rests between position holds. 3 seconds down, 7 seconds up. Instructors focus on position when they look, not between observations." The suggestion, technically within rules but rarely employed, allowed Rebecca to manage her muscle fatigue while maintaining the required position when most closely observed. It wasn't cheating, it was tactical adaptation to physiological reality. Rebecca implemented the technique, finding precious moments of muscle recovery without compromising the evolution's requirements. However, she noticed Senator Mitchell watching from the pier. His eyes narrowed as he conferred with one of the instructors. Moments later, her instructor approached in the water. Morgan maintained full extension at all times. No rest positions. The order was a direct hanger to the technique Martinez had suggested, and notably it was directed only at Rebecca, not the entire class. She glanced toward Richardson, who was observing the evolution with Hayes, but neither officer had noticed the selective instruction. Rebecca had no choice but to comply, knowing this would accelerate her muscle failure. She relied on pure mental discipline to maintain position as her arms began to shake uncontrollably. 20 minutes into the extended hold, Rebecca's muscles gave out completely. Her arms dropped momentarily below the required position before she forced them back up through sheer will. "Morgan fails the evolution," the instructor announced immediately. "Negative," came Hayes' voice from the pier. He had been watching more closely than Rebecca realized. "All candidates are permitted momentary muscle failure with immediate recovery. Standard protocol." The instructor glanced toward Mitchell, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Sir Morgan's position dropped below minimum standards for approximately 5 seconds. "I was observing directly," Hayes countered. It was no more than 2 seconds within acceptable parameters for all candidates. Evolution continues. The confrontation was brief but significant. Hayes was defending the integrity of the training standards against what appeared to be external influence. Mitchell's expression darkened briefly before he resumed his political mask. As the evolution continued, 5 more candidates dropped from the class unable to continue. Rebecca remained, though the cost became increasingly evident in her performance. During the next phase, underwater gear recovery, her movements were noticeably slower, her technique more deliberate than efficient. "Morgan's at her limit," Hayes commented to Richardson, who had returned to observe. "Most candidates are, but she's operating with less reserve capacity due to physiological differences." "Will she meet the standard?" Richardson asked. "She's meeting it now," Hayes replied. "The question is for how much longer?" The Admiral studied Rebecca's performance thoughtfully. This was never about proving women are identical to men physically. It's about proving that specific individuals can meet operational requirements regardless of category. And if she fails, then she fails as an individual, not as a representative of gender. That's the point. The steel pier evolution concluded with Rebecca among the surviving candidates, though visibly at the outer edge of human endurance. As they moved to the next phase, Martinez approached her during the transition. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his own exhaustion evident. "Still here," Rebecca replied simply. Martinez nodded. "You know, I had you all wrong at the beginning. Thought this was some political stunt. And now I'm just trying to keep up with you," he said with the ghost of a smile. "Never thought I'd say that." This small exchange represented something significant, genuine acceptance, based on demonstrated performance rather than preconception. It was exactly the paradigm shift Rebecca had sought throughout her military career. The 4th day concluded with what instructors called the mental phase, a series of academic tests and tactical decision-making scenarios conducted while candidates were at their most sleep-deprived. This tested not just knowledge, but the ability to access and apply that knowledge under extreme cognitive impairment. Rebecca excelled in this phase, her mental discipline allowing her to maintain focus despite hallucination-inducing fatigue. When presented with complex tactical scenarios, her combat experience provided context that many candidates lacked. "Outstanding solution," the instructor noted when Rebecca proposed an unconventional approach to a hostage scenario. "Creative but technically sound." As night fell and the 80-hour mark of sleep deprivation approached, the remaining candidates entered what SEAL veterans called the zombie phase, a state where basic functions became extraordinarily difficult and reality itself seemed to waver. Rebecca found herself experiencing microsleeps while standing in formation, seconds-long lapses in consciousness that ended with a physical jerk back to awareness. Her speech slowed, her cognitive processing delayed. Simple tasks like equipment preparation became complex puzzles requiring concentrated effort. Yet she continued, driven by something deeper than ambition or pride. The truth she had glimpsed during the coastal movement remained her anchor. This wasn't about proving a point, but about serving a principle that transcended gender politics or tradition. During the brief rest period, while other candidates attempted to maximize their limited sleep opportunity, Rebecca received an urgent summons to a secure communication room. There, Sullivan waited with disturbing news. "We've identified a critical threat," Sullivan said, without preamble, her expression grave. "The Society has activated contingency protocols at multiple installations. They're destroying evidence faster than we can secure it." Rebecca forced her fatigue-addled mind to process this information. How widespread? 17 locations across 12 states. Coordinated action with sophisticated countermeasures. This goes beyond Steele and Lawrence. Someone with significant authority is directing operations. "Do we have a name?" Sullivan hesitated. "We have a theory, but it's problematic. Our analysis of communication patterns points to someone with direct access to the Armed Services Committee." "Mitchell," Rebecca said, pieces falling into place. His questions during the steel pier evolution, the way he was conferring with the instructors. "He's trying to force my failure." "It's worse than that," Sullivan replied. "We've uncovered financial transactions linking Mitchell to society funding, dating back 20 years. He's not just connected, he appears to be their primary congressional asset." The revelation was staggering. A sitting senator, chairman of the committee overseeing military operations, actively participating in a conspiracy to manipulate selection standards. and undermine integration efforts. "What do you need from me?" Rebecca asked, conscious that her current physical and mental state made her a less than optimal intelligence asset. "Keep going," Sullivan replied. "Complete Hell Week. Your success represents their failure, which is why Mitchell is here personally. He's trying to ensure you don't make it." This was the 10th twist of fate, the revelation that the society's influence extended into the highest levels of military oversight, with Senator Mitchell himself attempting to sabotage Rebecca's training. What had begun as a personal struggle against discrimination had evolved into a counterintelligence operation with national security implications. As Rebecca returned to her boat crew for the start of Day 5, the final day of Hell Week, she carried this additional burden of awareness. The physical challenge of completing SEAL selection now combined with the operational security challenge of countering Mitchell's influence without revealing what she knew. The fifth day of Hell Week traditionally represented the culmination of suffering, the point where candidates had been pushed beyond normal human endurance into a state where only will remained. Physical resources were depleted, cognitive functions severely impaired, and motivation reduced to its most elemental form. Class 170 assembled on the beach before dawn, now reduced to just 28 candidates from the original 80. Their appearance was almost spectral, while hollow-eyed movement, mechanical verbal communication reduced to essential minimums. Captain Hayes addressed them with uncharacteristic solemnity. Day 5 candidates. You've survived 96 hours of the most demanding military training on Earth. Some of you won't complete today's evolution. Some who complete it will decide this path isn't for them. That's the purpose of Hell Week, to identify those with the unbreakable commitment required for special operations service. Jinan, he paused, surveying the exhausted faces before him. Today's evolution combines everything you've endured thus far: physical endurance, tactical decision-making, and team coordination under extreme conditions. Those who complete it will have earned the right to continue SEAL training regardless of background connections or any factor beyond performance. Rebecca noticed Senator Mitchell standing behind Hayes, his expression unreadable, as he studied the remaining candidates. Their eyes met briefly, and Rebecca saw something calculating behind the political facade, a predator assessing prey. The evolution began with a 15-mile movement carrying rubber boats and equipment similar to Day 3, but now with candidates in a severely depleted state. Rebecca's boat crew, reduced to 6 members through attrition, worked with the synchronization that comes only through shared suffering. 5 miles into the movement, disaster struck. Rodriguez, still nursing his ankle injury from Day 3, collapsed during a beach transition. Medical personnel immediately assessed his condition, determining that continued participation would risk permanent damage. "He's done," the medical officer informed Hayes. "Potential stress fracture in the tibia. Continuing would create unacceptable medical risk." Rodriguez fought against this evaluation. "I can finish, sir. Just need to redistribute weight." Hayes shook his head. "Not this time, candidate. Medical safety parameters are non-negotiable." As Rodriguez was evacuated, Rebecca's boat crew faced a critical challenge, completing the evolution with 1 fewer team member, meaning each remaining candidate would carry additional weight. "Redistribute by capability," Rebecca suggested. "Not equal portions." Martinez nodded, understanding her logic. "Morgan takes navigation and point position, lowest additional weight. Smith and Wilson take primary boat carry, highest weight addition. Thompson and I split the difference with equipment distribution." This adaptive approach, assigning responsibilities based on individual strengths rather than arbitrary equality, allowed the reduced team to maintain effectiveness despite their disadvantage. They continued the evolution, their pace slowing, but remaining within required parameters. At the 10-mile mark, Rebecca began experiencing symptoms of severe electrolyte imbalance, muscle cramping, cognitive disorientation, and the early indicators of hyponatremia. The medical risk was significant, potentially life-threatening, if not addressed. The senior medical officer noticed her deteriorating condition. "Morgan needs salt tabs and hydration. Her smaller body mass means accelerated electrolyte depletion relative to male candidates." This medical intervention standard for any candidate showing these symptoms became unexpectedly controversial when Senator Mitchell, still observing the training, questioned whether it represented special accommodation. "Are all candidates receiving this treatment?" he asked the medical officer. "Any candidate displaying these symptoms would receive identical intervention," the officer replied firmly. This is safety protocol, not accommodation. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. I've observed 3 male candidates with similar symptoms who haven't received intervention. The medical officer checked his records, clearly confused. Sir, no other candidates have presented with stage 2 hyponatremia indicators. Perhaps you're not looking closely enough. Mitchell suggested, his tone deceptively casual. Or perhaps the standards are being selectively applied. Admiral Richardson, observing this exchange, approached Mitchell. Senator, medical safety standards are applied equally to all candidates based on physiological indicators, not identity categories. That's precisely the merit-based approach we're working to establish throughout special operations selection. Of course, Admiral, Mitchell replied, his tone smoothly political. I'm merely ensuring process integrity, given the significance of this particular class. The interaction confirmed Rebecca's suspicions about Mitchell's true interest in Hell Week. His question wasn't motivated by concern for fairness, but by desire to find or create any basis for questioning her achievement. As the boat crew continued their movement, Rebecca processed this observation through her fatigue-addled mind. If Mitchell was connected to the society, his presence here served a dual purpose, gathering intelligence about the investigation while looking for opportunities to discredit her performance. During a brief water break, Rebecca noticed Mitchell speaking intently with one of the more traditional instructors, Chief Warrant Officer Blackburn, known for his rigid adherence to conventional SEAL methodologies. Their conversation appeared heated, with Mitchell gesturing emphatically while Blackburn listened with growing concern. The final phase of Hell Week took place at the demolition range, where candidates would demonstrate tactical explosive placement under simulated combat conditions. This evolution tested fine motor skills, technical knowledge, and judgment, all severely compromised after 100+ hours without meaningful sleep. As Rebecca's team prepared for the demolition challenge, Blackburn approached them with an unexpected announcement. Change of plans for Boat Crew 5. You'll be conducting an advanced demolition scenario, multiple target types with complex timing requirements. Martinez frowned. Sir, that's the Phase 3 demo qualification, not the Hell Week evolution. Special evaluation, Blackburn replied without elaboration. Admiral's orders. Rebecca glanced toward where Richardson had been observing earlier, but the Admiral was nowhere in sight. Hayes was similarly absent, having been called away to address an apparent security issue at the perimeter. The advanced scenario was dramatically more complex than what other boat crews faced, requiring precision measurements, detailed calculations, and sequential detonation timing that would challenge even fully rested operators. The setup appeared deliberately designed to induce failure through excessive complexity. This isn't standard, Martinez whispered as they assessed the scenario requirements. Something's wrong. Rebecca nodded imperceptibly. Mitchell's influence. He's trying to create failure conditions. Then loudly enough for Blackburn to hear. Let's approach this systematically. Martinez take lead on the primary charge placement. Thompson handle timing calculations. I'll manage the sequential detonator wiring. The team tackled the challenge methodically, with Martinez taking lead based on his prior experience with explosives. When a critical detonator appeared to malfunction, Rebecca's troubleshooting skills identified a simple solution that saved the evolution. Electronics background, Martinez asked as they completed the task. Grandfather taught me circuitry basics, Rebecca replied. Said understanding how things break helps you fix them. Despite the deliberately excessive complexity, the boat crew completed the advanced demolition scenario, successfully demonstrating exactly the adaptive problem-solving that defines SEAL operations. Blackburn's expression revealed mixed emotions, professional respect for their performance, competing with apparent disappointment at their success. When Hayes returned and discovered the unauthorized scenario change, his response was immediate and decisive. Chief Blackburn, report to my office immediately. Standard evaluations only, no deviations without my direct authorization. Rebecca overheard fragments of Hayes's subsequent radio communication with Richardson. Unauthorized scenario modification appears deliberately excessive. Mitchell's involvement unclear but suspected. The incident represented Mitchell's most overt attempt to engineer Rebecca's failure, and its backfire demonstrated that merit-based evaluation could withstand even direct interference from powerful influences. As sunset approached on the final day, the remaining candidates assembled for the culminating ritual of Hell Week, the Secure the Brass ceremony, where each successful candidate rang the same bell that others had used to quit, but now as a symbol of completion rather than surrender. Captain Hayes addressed the surviving 23 candidates. You have completed Hell Week, the most physically and mentally demanding training in the United States military. This achievement represents not the end, but the beginning of your journey toward earning the Trident. One by one, candidates approached the bell rang at once and received the handshake that acknowledged their accomplishment. When Rebecca's turn came, Hayes met her eyes with professional respect. Staff Sergeant Morgan, you have successfully completed Hell Week according to all established standards and requirements. Congratulations. The simple statement, delivered without qualification or special emphasis, represented something revolutionary. Rebecca Morgan had become the first woman in history to complete SEAL Hell Week, evaluated against identical standards as her male counterparts. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Richardson approached with Sullivan, their expressions suggesting urgent developments. Staff Sergeant Morgan, your presence is requested at the Pentagon immediately. The Secretary of Defense wants a first-hand briefing on the Society investigation and Senator Mitchell's involvement. Rebecca nodded, exhaustion evident despite her composure. And my training status, sir. Temporarily paused pending the investigation's completion. But your place in Class 170 is secured. Richardson added quietly, Mitchell's attempts to interfere with your evaluation have been documented and added to the investigation file. His involvement is now a primary focus. As Rebecca prepared to depart, Coronado Martinez approached. Morgan, he said, extending his hand. Hell of a week. Indeed, she replied, accepting the handshake. Thanks for the team adaptations. Made the difference several times. That's what operating is about, and adapting to reality, not forcing it to match preconceptions. He hesitated. When you return to training, we'll be ready. You've earned your place here. This simple acknowledgement from a fellow candidate who had initially been her most vocal opponent represented something profound, the beginning of a cultural shift within the most traditional special operations community, not through mandates or policies, but through demonstrated capability and shared hardship. The Pentagon briefing room hummed with tension as Rebecca, still bearing the physical evidence of Hell Week, prepared to address the assembled military leadership. The Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs representatives, and intelligence directors had gathered to assess the full implications of the Society investigation. Rebecca had showered and changed into a fresh uniform, but no cosmetic improvements could disguise the effects of 120 hours with minimal sleep and maximum physical exertion. Her face remained gaunt, eyes sunken, movements measured to conserve energy. Sullivan had provided a comprehensive intelligence briefing during the flight from Coronado, updating Rebecca on developments across multiple fronts. The Society's network had proven more extensive than initially estimated, with connections to military procurement, personnel assignment, and even congressional oversight functions. Staff Sergeant Morgan, the Secretary of Defense, began. Your investigation has uncovered what appears to be the most significant conspiracy within military leadership since Operation Paperclip. Please brief this group on your findings and assessment. Rebecca organized her presentation with military precision despite her exhaustion. She outlined the discovery of Project Artemis through her grandfather's journals, the overheard conversation about Operation Guardian, and the systematic evidence of selection manipulation uncovered at the Chimera facility. The Society for Military Tradition began as an informal association of officers concerned about changing military demographics following Vietnam, she explained. By the mid-1970s, it had evolved into a structured organization with specific objectives, primarily maintaining gender segregation in combat and special operations roles. She displayed organizational charts showing the Society's growth across decades. What distinguished this from typical resistance to institutional change was its methodology. The Society didn't simply advocate for traditional standards, it actively manipulated testing protocols, research data, and personnel assignments to ensure traditional standards could not be met by targeted demographic groups. The Joint Chiefs chairman leaned forward. Are you suggesting they deliberately designed physical requirements to exclude women rather than to meet operational needs? The evidence is conclusive, sir, Rebecca replied, displaying documents recovered from the Chimera facility. These internal memos explicitly discuss modifying test parameters to ensure female failure rates, while maintaining the appearance of objective standards. She continued methodically through the evidence demonstrating how the society had systematically undermined gender integration efforts across multiple services while maintaining plausible deniability through appeals to standards and combat effectiveness. The Secretary of Defense studied the documents with growing concern. This conspiracy appears to extend beyond military channels. Your report mentions potential congressional involvement. Rebecca hesitated, conscious of the political sensitivity. Communication patterns and financial records directly linked Senator Mitchell to society operations. His personal intervention during my Hell Week training appears consistent with society methodology, attempting to create failure conditions through non-standard evaluation parameters. The revelation created visible tension among the civilian leadership present. Mitchell was a powerful figure in military oversight with significant influence over budgets and appointments. We should proceed cautiously with congressional implications, the Secretary advised. Focus on the documented military conspiracy while we develop additional intelligence on civilian connections. As the briefing concluded, a staff officer entered with an urgent message for the Secretary. After reading it, he addressed the group. Senator Mitchell has requested to address this committee regarding Staff Sergeant Morgan's allegations. He's waiting in the adjacent conference room. The announcement created immediate concern. Sullivan whispered to Rebecca, "This is unprecedented. He's trying to get ahead of the investigation by challenging your credibility directly." The Secretary considered the request before nodding. "Let's hear what the Senator has to say." Staff Sergeant Morgan will remain present. Moments later, Senator Mitchell entered, accompanied by two aides carrying document folders. His expression betrayed no concern, despite the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Secretary Joint Chiefs." Mitchell began, his tone smoothly diplomatic. "I appreciate the opportunity to address these troubling allegations. While I fully support investigating any legitimate misconduct, I'm concerned that we may be witnessing a concerning rush to judgment based on fragmentary evidence and misinterpreted documents." He gestured to Rebecca. "Staff Sergeant Morgan's recent performance during SEAL training, while impressive, has potentially biased this investigation. Her personal investment in changing selection standards may have led to over-interpreting routine administrative communications as evidence of conspiracy." Rebecca maintained her professional composure despite the direct attack on her integrity. The Senator was employing a classic disinformation technique, acknowledging her accomplishment while simultaneously undermining its legitimacy. Mitchell continued, "The documents referenced from the so-called Chimera facility require contextual understanding. Many represent legitimate research into physiological performance factors relevant to special operations research that has improved training effectiveness for all candidates." He distributed folders to the committee members. "These records demonstrate that the research in question was approved through proper channels with appropriate oversight from military medical authorities." Rebecca studied the documents as they were passed around the table. The materials appeared legitimate at first glance: official letterheads, appropriate signatures, sequential reference numbers. But something about the typography triggered her recognition. "Sir," she addressed the Secretary directly, "these documents use a font that wasn't adopted by the Department of Defense until 2015. They claim to authorize research conducted in 1987. The observation created immediate silence. Mitchell's expression froze momentarily before he recovered. Clearly a reproduction issue with the archival copies. Additionally, Rebecca continued, "The authorization signatures include General Thomas Hayward, who retired in 1982, 5 years before these supposed authorizations were granted." Sullivan examined the documents more closely. "These are forgeries, sophisticated ones, but definitive forgeries. The Senator is presenting falsified evidence to a military oversight committee." The tension in the room became palpable. Mitchell's political mask slipped, revealing cold anger beneath. These procedural discrepancies don't invalidate the fundamental point that performance standards must remain consistent to ensure operational effectiveness. "We agree completely, Senator," Rebecca replied evenly. "Standards should be consistent and directly related to operational requirements. What the society has done is manipulate those standards to ensure predetermined outcomes rather than identify genuine capability." Mitchell's composure cracked further. "You don't understand what's at stake here. Military effectiveness isn't just about individual performance, it's about unit cohesion, tradition, the warrior ethos that has defined American military excellence for generations. With respect, Senator, where Rebecca countered, that excellence comes from selecting the most capable operators regardless of category. The society has actively prevented that by eliminating qualified candidates based on factors unrelated to capability. The Secretary of Defense intervened. Senator Mitchell, in light of Staff Sergeant Morgan's observations about document authenticity, I must ask, are you personally involved with the Society for Military Tradition? Mitchell's expression hardened. I decline to answer that question without legal counsel present. This meeting is clearly proceeding without appropriate procedural safeguards. This isn't a legal proceeding, Senator, the Secretary replied. It's a national security briefing regarding a conspiracy that appears to have compromised military selection integrity. Your presentation of apparently falsified documents raises serious concerns about your involvement. As Mitchell prepared to respond, a security officer entered with another urgent message. The Secretary read it and addressed Mitchell directly. Senator, I've just been informed that FBI agents are executing search warrants at your offices in Washington and Virginia. Computer records recovered from the Chimera facility have provided sufficient evidence for a federal investigation into conspiracy against the United States government. Mitchell's political mask disintegrated completely. You have no idea what forces you're challenging. The Society has protected American military excellence for 50 years against political correctness, against social engineering, against the degradation of standards that made our special operations forces the world's finest. No, Senator, Rebecca said quietly. The Society has protected privilege at the expense of excellence. It has denied the military access to qualified operators based on characteristics unrelated to performance. That hasn't strengthened special operations. It's undermined the fundamental principle of merit-based selection. As security personnel escorted Mitchell from the room, the Secretary of Defense addressed Rebecca directly. Staff Sergeant Morgan, your service in uncovering this conspiracy has been extraordinary, particularly while simultaneously completing SEAL Hell Week, a feat unprecedented in military history. The President has been briefed on your actions and wishes to recognize your contribution personally. Rebecca acknowledged this with appropriate professionalism, though her thoughts were already elsewhere on the remaining challenges of SEAL training and the continuing threat from society elements still in positions of authority. As the briefing adjourned, the Secretary requested a private word with Rebecca. The President is prepared to offer you a direct commission as Lieutenant Commander with assignment to a Special Intelligence Task Force investigating the Society. This would provide appropriate rank for the operation while recognizing your unique contributions. The offer was extraordinary, a multi-grade promotion that would place Rebecca in a position of significant authority within the intelligence community. It also represented an elegant exit from SEAL training, allowing her to claim victory without completing the remaining phases. Rebecca considered this carefully. The promotion was tempting, offering immediate recognition and influence. The intelligence assignment aligned with her proven capabilities in investigation and analysis. The opportunity to lead the dismantling of the Society's network represented meaningful impact on military selection integrity. Yet accepting would mean abandoning the SEAL qualification path at precisely the moment when her success had begun changing perceptions. It would allow traditionalists to claim she had sought an easier path rather than completing the full selection process. Most importantly, it would undermine the fundamental principle she had fought to establish, that standards should apply equally without regard to category. Mr. Secretary, I am deeply honored by the President's offer, Rebecca replied. However, I believe completing SEAL training, according to established standards, remains essential to establishing the principles we're fighting for. With respect, I request permission to complete my current assignment before accepting any new position. The Secretary studied her with newfound respect. You understand that SEAL training has a significant failure rate even after Hell Week. This offer might not be available if you attempt to complete training and don't succeed. I understand the risk, sir, but this was never about guaranteed success. It was about equal opportunity to try, with evaluation based solely on performance. After a moment's consideration, the Secretary nodded. Very well, Staff Sergeant. Complete your SEAL qualification. The intelligence assignment will remain available should you succeed. This was the 11th twist of fate, Rebecca's decision to reject extraordinary advancement in favor of completing the path she had started, regardless of risk or hardship. It represented the triumph of principle over personal gain, of long-term institutional change over immediate recognition. Rebecca returned to Coronado 2 weeks later, having recovered from the physical effects of Hell Week and contributed to the expanding society investigation. Phase 2 of SEAL training focused on combat diving and underwater operations was scheduled to begin the following day. As she checked in at the training center, Captain Hayes provided an update on developments during her absence. Class 170 is down to 20 candidates now. 3 more withdrew during the recovery period, realizing they didn't actually want the job, just the accomplishment of completing Hell Week. "And my boat crew?" Rebecca asked. "All still in. Martinez has emerged as a strong class leader. He's been emphasizing adaptability and pre-phase preparation, interesting shift in mentality." Rebecca nodded, recognizing how her presence had influenced training philosophy. The emphasis on adaptability rather than conformity represented exactly the paradigm shift needed throughout special operations selection. As she prepared for the underwater phase, Rebecca received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Richardson, accompanied by a woman in her 70s, whose bearing suggested military background despite her civilian clothes. "Staff Sergeant Morgan," Richardson said, "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Katherine Johnson." The name registered immediately. Katherine Johnson, the primary operator from Project Artemis, credited with 18 confirmed eliminations in Rebecca's grandfather's journals. A living connection to the legacy that had inspired her journey. "Mrs. Johnson," Rebecca said, extending her hand, "it's an honor." "The honor is mine," Johnson replied, her grip still firm despite her age. "When Admiral Richardson told me about your discoveries and accomplishments, I knew I needed to meet you." Johnson had been located through the investigation, one of the few surviving Artemis operators still able to provide first-hand testimony about the program. Her perspective would prove invaluable in documenting the historical precedent for women in special operations roles. "Your grandfather was a good man," Johnson said as they walked along the Coronado beachfront. "Samuel Morgan understood that capability mattered more than category. He gave us the opportunity to serve when most wouldn't even consider it." "He never mentioned Artemis to my father," Rebecca noted. "Kept those journals hidden for decades." Johnson nodded sadly. "We were sworn to secrecy. When the program was terminated, all records were supposedly destroyed. Samuel's preservation of those journals was technically a security violation, but a moral imperative." "Why was Artemis shut down if it was successful?" Rebecca asked. "Politics changed. Vietnam created military disillusionment. The women's movement was gaining momentum in ways that threatened traditional power structures. Artemis represented something certain leaders couldn't control: women demonstrating capabilities that contradicted fundamental assumptions about gender limitations." The parallel to Rebecca's current situation was unmistakable. Johnson seemed to read her thoughts. "The society formed in direct response to Artemis," the older woman continued. "Our success terrified them because it undermined their core belief system. If women could perform exceptionally in roles traditionally reserved for men, what other assumptions might prove false?" Rebecca considered this. "It was never really about standards, was it?" "Standards were the convenient justification," Johnson confirmed. "The real issue was control over who could join the warrior class. The special operations community represents the modern equivalent of traditional warrior castes with all the status, tradition, and exclusivity that implies." As they watched SEAL candidates conducting surf passage exercises, Johnson offered a final observation. "What you've accomplished already exceeds anything we achieved with Artemis. We operated in shadows, our contributions deliberately erased. You're creating change in the open where it can't be buried again." Johnson reached into her bag and removed a small box. "I want you to have this. It belonged to a teammate of mine, Marie Diaz. She was our best diver, could outperform any male operator underwater. She always said that water was the great equalizer, that buoyancy and technique mattered more than raw strength." Inside the box was a diving watch, an early military issue model designed for special operations use. "Marie would have wanted you to have this for your combat diving phase. Let it remind you that others walked this path before, even if history tried to erase them." This was the 12th twist of fate, the connection between Project Artemis and Rebecca's current path, revealing that her struggle was not unprecedented, but rather the continuation of a legacy temporarily suppressed by those who feared its implications. The combat diving phase of SEAL training proved particularly challenging. Where Hell Week had tested pure endurance, and Will the Underwater Operations module demanded technical precision under conditions of sensory deprivation and extreme environmental stress. Rebecca approached each evolution methodically applying the diving principles Katherine Johnson had shared from the Artemis program. She discovered that Johnson had been right underwater technique and efficiency often mattered more than raw physical power. During the closed-circuit rebreather qualification, perhaps the most technically demanding aspect of combat, diving Rebecca's smaller lung volume actually provided an advantage requiring less gas consumption and allowing longer operational duration. Morgan's maintaining impressive gas efficiency, the diving instructor noted to Hayes. Her oxygen consumption rates are consistently 15 to 20% below class average for equivalent work output. Physiological adaptation or technique, Hayes asked. Both, the instructor replied. Smaller body mass reduces baseline oxygen requirements, but her movement economy is exceptional minimum energy expenditure for maximum output. The observation formalized something Rebecca had long understood. Different physical profiles created different capability advantages in specific operational contexts. The key was matching individual characteristics to mission requirements, rather than forcing conformity to a single physical standard. As the diving phase progressed, the candidates faced increasingly complex underwater navigation challenges. During one particularly demanding night exercise in zero visibility conditions, Rebecca's spatial awareness and tactile navigation skills allowed her to complete an underwater circuit that stymied several other candidates. "How did you maintain orientation without visual references?" Martinez asked afterward. "Tactile memory," Rebecca explained. "I created a mental map based on texture changes in the seafloor and current patterns against my skin. Grandfather taught me to navigate by feel in the Appalachian forest at night, same principle, different medium." The final diving qualification involved a simulated equipment failure at depth, a potentially life-threatening scenario that tested both technical knowledge and stress management. When her primary regulator failed, intentionally disabled by instructors, Rebecca executed the emergency procedures, flawlessly switching to backup systems without panic despite the deliberately disorienting conditions. Textbook response, the lead diving instructor commented afterward. "Calm assessment, prioritize actions, efficient execution. Exactly what we're looking for in combat divers." By the conclusion of Phase 2, Rebecca had not only met but exceeded the diving qualification standards. Her performance demonstrated the precise adaptation capabilities that define successful special operations personnel, the ability to function effectively in extreme environments by leveraging individual strengths while compensating for limitations. Phase 3 focused on land warfare weapons and demolitions built directly on Rebecca's established strengths. Her exceptional marksmanship abilities, demonstrated so dramatically at Fort Benning, translated immediately to the advanced shooting modules required for SEAL qualification. During the culminating field training exercise, a complex multi-day mission requiring all elements of SEAL capabilities, Rebecca served as the primary sniper for her squad, providing overwatch during infiltration phases and precision fire support during simulated operations. The scenario involved a hostage rescue operation in contested territory requiring stealthy approach precision, target discrimination, and coordinated action under extreme time constraints. Rebecca's boat crew, with Martinez as squad leader, executed the mission with exceptional effectiveness, achieving all primary objectives with minimal simulated casualties. Morgan's precision fire support created operational flexibility that enhanced overall mission effectiveness. Martinez reported during the after-action review. Her target discrimination and engagement prioritization demonstrated excellent tactical judgment. As Phase 3 concluded, the 20 remaining candidates, including Rebecca, assembled for final evaluation before graduation. Captain Hayes addressed them with uncharacteristic emotion. "Candidates, you have completed the most demanding selection process in the United States military. Your performance has been evaluated against established standards designed to identify those capable of executing the most challenging missions our nation requires. Those standards have been applied equally and fairly to each of you." He paused, his gaze moving across the formation before settling briefly on Rebecca. Some of you have overcome extraordinary obstacles to reach this point. Some have demonstrated capabilities that challenge conventional assumptions about military potential. All of you have earned the right to continue to SEAL qualification training and the opportunity to earn the Trident. This was the 13th twist of fate Rebecca Morgan had completed the full SEAL selection course, according to all established standards demonstrating that capability, rather than category, should determine military opportunity. Her success would fundamentally alter special operations selection philosophy moving forward. 6 months later, Rebecca stood at attention as Admiral Richardson pinned the SEAL Trident insignia to her uniform. The ceremony, attended by military leadership and selected media, represented the formal recognition of her qualification as the first female Navy SEAL in American history. Lieutenant Morgan Richardson said, having promoted her upon completion of SEAL qualification training, "You have met or exceeded every standard required to earn the Trident. Your performance throughout selection and qualification has demonstrated the principle that capability, not category, determines operational effectiveness." The journey from Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morgan to Lieutenant Rebecca Morgan, SEAL qualified, had transformed not just her career, but military selection philosophy. The society investigation had resulted in 27 convictions, including 3 generals, 2 admirals, and Senator Mitchell himself, who resigned in disgrace following indictment. More significantly, the evidence Rebecca had uncovered led to a comprehensive review of selection standards across all special operations communities. The review confirmed what she had demonstrated through performance, that genuine operational requirements, rather than tradition or preference, should determine qualification standards. Katherine Johnson attended the ceremony representing the Artemis operators whose contributions had been deliberately erased from military history. The Project Artemis files had been declassified as part of the investigation, allowing these pioneering women to finally receive recognition for their service. Today, we not only recognize Lieutenant Morgan's extraordinary achievement, Admiral Richardson announced, but also acknowledge the legacy of Project Artemis, the women who served with distinction decades ago, only to have their contributions deliberately hidden from history. Their service, like Lieutenant Morgan's, proves that excellence transcends category. Johnson, now officially recognized with the Distinguished Service Medal that had been denied her for decades, embraced Rebecca after the ceremony. "You've done more than earn the Trident," she said quietly. "You've restored truth to history." As the formal proceedings concluded, Martinez, now Lieutenant Junior Grade Martinez, following his own commissioning, approached Rebecca with the traditional SEAL team greeting, a firm handshake, and the simple acknowledgement, "Teammate." "Ready for assignment?" he asked. Rebecca nodded. "SEAL Team 4 Direct Action Platoon. You by the peso." "Same," Martinez replied with a smile. Apparently, they value operators who can adapt to diverse team capabilities. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Richardson with a distinguished civilian visitor, the Secretary of Defense. "Lieutenant Morgan," the Secretary said, "congratulations on your achievement. The President sends his personal regards and has asked me to deliver something personally." He presented Rebecca with an envelope bearing the presidential seal. Inside was a handwritten note from the Commander-in-Chief, along with formal notification of a special assignment. The Society investigation has revealed similar selection manipulation patterns in Allied special operations communities, the Secretary explained. "NATO has requested your participation in a multinational task force examining selection reform across Alliance special operations units. This assignment will allow you to serve both as an operator and as a catalyst for institutional change beyond our borders." The assignment represented an extraordinary opportunity, combining operational service with the chance to extend the principles of merit-based selection throughout Allied military structures. It acknowledged both Rebecca's tactical capabilities and her unique perspective on selection reform. "I'd be honored, Mr. Secretary," Rebecca replied. "When do I begin?" "After your first operational deployment with Team 4, the Secretary said. "The President and I agree that you should experience the full range of SEAL operations before undertaking the NATO assignment." The decision reflected wisdom. Rebecca appreciated her credibility as a selection reform advocate would be enhanced by demonstrated operational experience. The sequential assignments would allow her to prove herself first as a SEAL operator before leveraging that experience in transforming selection systems. 1 year later, after completing a successful deployment to the Western Pacific with SEAL Team 4, Lieutenant Morgan began her NATO assignment. The task force included representatives from British SAS, German KSK, French GIGN, and other elite units, all grappling with similar questions about how to identify and select the most capable operators regardless of traditional categories. During the task force's first briefing in Brussels, Rebecca presented the findings from the Society investigation documenting how artificial barriers had been deliberately created to exclude qualified candidates based on factors unrelated to operational capability. The question before us isn't whether standards should be maintained, she explained to the multinational audience. It's whether those standards genuinely reflect operational requirements or simply preserve traditional assumptions about who can meet those requirements. The British SAS commander nodded in agreement. We've found that certain physical profiles excel in specific operational contexts. The key is matching individual capabilities to mission requirements, not forcing conformity to a single physical standard. This approach, identifying genuine operational requirements and evaluating candidates against those requirements without predetermined exclusions, became the foundation for NATO's Special Operations Selection Reform Initiative. The initiative would eventually transform selection processes across alliance member states, creating pathways for exceptional candidates who might previously have been excluded based on category rather than capability. On the 10th anniversary of the Fort Benning incident, now Commander Rebecca Morgan returned to the observation tower where she had fired the 15 shots that changed military history. The tower had been preserved as a historical site with a simple plaque commemorating the event that had initiated fundamental reform in special operations selection. As she stood at the shooting position, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had followed those 15 shots. The discovery of Project Artemis, the exposure of the society, the completion of SEAL training, and the subsequent transformation of selection processes throughout NATO special operations communities, all stemming from that single moment when capability had transcended category. Katherine Johnson, now in her 80s, but still remarkably vital, joined her at the tower. Your grandfather would be proud, she said simply. Not just of me, Rebecca replied, of what's happened since. The Artemis operators recognized at last selection based on demonstrated capability rather than category. The principles he believed in finally implemented. Johnson nodded, her gaze distant with memory. Samuel used to say that truth matters even when hidden. Thanks to you, this truth isn't hidden anymore. The 15 shots Rebecca had fired at Fort Benning had initiated a sequence of events that transformed special operations selection throughout the American military. What had begun as a personal quest for opportunity had evolved into institutional change that would benefit generations of service members, creating a system where demonstrated capability, rather than category or convention, determined who could serve at the highest levels. As Rebecca prepared for her next assignment, command of a multinational special operations task force combining operators from across NATO, she carried with her the legacy of those who had come before her grandfather, who had preserved the truth when others sought to bury it. The Artemis operators who had demonstrated excellence only to have their contributions erased. And all those who had maintained that capability, not category, should determine who serves. The 15 shots she had fired at Fort Benning had indeed changed everything, but her ultimate impact came not from those shots themselves, but from the barriers they helped shatter and the principles they helped establish. The truth she had helped reveal, that human capability transcended convenient categories, would never be hidden again. 20 years after those 15 shots echoed across Fort Benning, their impact reverberates through the halls of power and the hidden corners of military history. Rebecca Morgan's journey cost her more than most will ever understand, countless nights of suffering moments where her body begged to surrender while her mind refused, in battles fought not just against external threats, but against a system designed to ensure her failure. What was gained transcends her personal triumph. The truth about Project Artemis emerged from darkness. Katherine Johnson and her fellow operators finally received the recognition decades overdue. Most importantly, a fundamental principle was restored to American military selection. That capability, not category, determines who serves at the highest levels. The trident that Admiral Morgan wears represents more than personal achievement. It stands as testament to an American value too often forgotten, that excellence recognizes no artificial boundaries. In the quiet moments between missions, Rebecca sometimes traces the scar on her shoulder from Hell Week, a permanent reminder that some battles leave marks that never fade yet still are worth the fighting. What hidden truths remain buried in our institutions, waiting for someone with the courage to bring them into the light? What unsung heroes stand ready to serve, if only given the chance to prove their worth?